Roll call, please.
Mayor Alahouzes,
Here.
Vice Mayor Banther,
Here.
Commissioner Sieber,
Here.
Commissioner Kikto, Commissioner Carr.
Here.
Tonight's invocation will be given by Reverend Parkinson. If you please stand and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Would you please bow your heads with me as we pray? Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening on behalf of the citizens of Tarpon Springs. We are very mindful about our responsibilities as governmental leaders within this community. We ask that you would guide us as we seek your direction tonight regarding the governmental affairs of this great city. We pray for each and every citizen and ask that you would carefully watch over them. And we also pray for our first responders and those whose job it is to protect us and at times even place themselves in harm's way on our behalf. Guide and direct our city leaders this evening as they seek to make only the best decisions on behalf of our citizenry. For we pray all of these things in the name of Jesus, the risen Lord. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you very much. Welcome to our commission meeting. We are now going to the public comments of the items that will not be discussed tonight. If you have any comments, please come forward, state your name and your address for the record. You'll be given 4 minutes.
Joan Jennings, 2204 Pine Drive, Tarpon Springs. First, I'd like to thank all of the elected individuals in Tarpon Springs for their efforts to get the dredge of the Anclote River accomplished. And I'd like to especially commend Bob Robertson and Karen Lemons for their expertise and hard work in getting this necessary project done for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. You know that we're going to have an update on that item today. Okay, thank you.
Athena Tardulia, 634 East Orange, Tarpon Springs, Florida, and also co-owner of Tarpon Sponge Incorporated. I'm just here this evening to speak in favor and support of the United the Islands events. I think it's one of the greatest things the city has done to promote our unique culture here. The only thing that I would ask, possibly, if we could look at pushing back the setup time closer to 5 o'clock rather than 3, to keep the Dodecanese Boulevard open a little bit longer on those Saturdays. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Andreas Olivares, 495 Riverside Drive. I own 3 places in Spandax, and I'm going to ask the city commissioners not to stop off the island of the Greek island in Spandax, because it's not only for the Greeks, for everybody. And if you stop it, and I know you know a few people from the commissioners that don't want it, I don't know why it's against the Greek community. Number 2, I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to show you something. If this picture is appropriate for the spandax, are we operate the spandax or we destroy the spandax? Who give the permission, how we give the permissions to anyone to put anything in spandax, to make like a flea market? I want to respond for all of you, especially for the city manager and for the mayor. One more thing. You close the Tarpon Avenue every time you have the Tarpon Avenue have events. No directions to say spandex. We close the streets, and the people that come from out of town or out of state, they don't know how they come to spandex. Please appreciate. Next time, put an arrow to say spandex. Spandex is the place which the city make money. Would not ignore spandex. I said this before, and I repeat again. Constantly, I'm going to repeat if it's city commissioners, they don't listen. We have people to survive in the spandex, not only the restaurant, but the families. Please appreciate you listen to me.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners, City Manager, Chief Cochin, Honorable City Clerk Irene. A couple things I wanted to talk about tonight. First off, I don't know if y'all remembered a few months ago when the eclipse came. Y'all remember this? Y'all remember that? Back on the back, here's a graph of where the eclipse was going to go that day. People planned excursions, honeymoons, weddings, all kinds of things to be somewhere along this path. Locally, every day in the sports section, tides listed ahead of time, sunrise, sunset, moonrise, moonset. It's pretty accurate. I was at Howard Park the other day, watched the sun, 5:34, 5:34. Amazing. All these predictions are based on what? Scientific data, a lot of it from NOAA, and yet everyday people accept this data and rely on it for things to make decisions upon. And they accept it as, yeah, that's good data. So why is it when we have flooding and king tides, like we had a small one the other night, I don't know if the docks got water, the bayou did, we still deny the effects of climate change? And why do I bring this up? Because currently, we're going backwards. As many of you saw in the paper today or heard on the news that President Trump wants to cut back the size of monuments. Why? Allow forestry, drilling, fracking. Why are we going back to the coal and the petro age? All it's going to do is continue to create more carbon dioxide, create more global heating, warming, however you want to call it. We've had the warmest. Even Dennis Phillips today was watching before I came. Warmest 2 weeks in a while. We'll have another one warm tomorrow. So we really need to step up our game on letting those who are in position in Washington and also in Tallahassee that we cannot continue to accept that. And just to highlight that, I'm sure y'all are all aware of all the news about the tax supposedly cut rebate, which most of the people that we know will be negatively affected. But we're giving corporations welfare from 35 to 20. I mean, where do they get their money? They get it from us. If we get the money to the people, then we'll have more money to buy the products. The stock market is like raging. Why? Because they're not only making profits above and beyond what they've ever made in years, but all those investors are looking at that tax break because they know those corporations are going to turn around and pass it on to dividends and buybacks, and it won't be for the jobs. Where is the infrastructure? Where is the help for our bridges and roads that we were promised? Where is that? Elections are coming in another 10 months. We have the ability to rally and let people know how we feel. So I just would urge those who are among us that are concerned about our own welfare and our neighbors' welfare and our future to speak out. And I bring this before the board here not only as a public ability to spread this word out to the public, but this board here has a unique position. You are in touch with people who have the ability to make these decisions, especially Mr. Bilirakis, who voted for that tax cut repeal, and it's going to come up again for a vote. If you watch any of the news that describes some of the breaks, people who have private jets are going to get deductions for that. If you own golf courses, you're going to get deductions for that. However, state income and local taxes that people pay in those states, that's going to be gone. And you know, that will have an effect on us, because when their property values start dropping and they can't, let's say, afford living there, where are they going to go? Florida, no tax state here. You think our roads are bad now? If this goes through and a couple of years from now people are hurting up there, they're going to be down here. And I know we like growth, but we've seen uncontrolled growth. And until we get a master plan for our transit, we're going to be stuck on our roads. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Sure. Please state your name and your address for the record.
Good evening. My first time here, Dimitri Savalas, my name, 1250 South Pinellas Ave in Tarpon Springs. And although I see it on the list of number 9, ordinance for idle speed, in the river, I have a boat, and I see people speeding all the time. So I'm just hoping tonight, whatever the subject is, however you deal with it, that there's some rules that you...
Excuse me, sir, this is an item that we're going to be discussing later. If you want to wait,
Sure, okay,
if you
sorry.
want to
I
wait
didn't-
and comment on that, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any other comments that is not on the agenda? For items that's not on the agenda? Well, thank you. We are now going to the presentation of internal auditor Carr, Riggs, and Ingram.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Ron Herring, Finance Director. Tonight we have the city's internal auditors, Carr, Riggs, and Ingram, who will present the proposed risk assessment and internal audit plan. Carr, Riggs, and Ingram was a firm selected by the board to provide internal audit services for the city. They are contracted to provide these services for 5 years, from fiscal year 2017 to fiscal year 2021. Tonight we have Deborah Good, engagement partner, and Rob Brolin, partner from CRI, to present the proposed risk assessment and internal audit plan.
Thank you. Ron, good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We are thrilled to be here today to present to you our risk assessment. And we have some slides to go through. We're going to do this very briefly. Let's see if I can. There we go. So the purpose of the risk assessment is to really help the City Commission decide where are the risky areas here at the city that we believe need to be the focus of your internal audit. And I'm going to cover for you in a minute why and how we kind of come up with these areas. In order to come up with the risk assessment, Rob and I came here and we got an understanding of what's going on at the city, business operation-wise, culture-wise. We looked at your annual budget. We looked at budgets by department. We looked at your CAFR. We looked at the previous internal audits that were done. We looked at your external audit. And a really important part of our process was interviews. We did a lot of interviews. We met with several city commissioners. We met with the mayor, the city manager, the police chief, the fire chief, and pretty much all the other department heads. And we used a standardized risk assessment questionnaire that you have in your package towards the back. And again, you know, both Rob and I, we work with a lot of government entities. We do a lot of auditing, so we have an understanding of government and where the risk is. But each government is a little bit different, and so it's really important to sit down and understand what is going on at your particular city that might increase risk. There are several risk factors that we look at. These are the 5 top risk factors that you would look at for internal audit purposes. One is the control environment. That includes, an example would be the tone at the top, but also it's internal controls that are in place, segregation of duties, and again, we do this at a very high level to determine where do we think the risk is. The other item is change. Depending on how much change you've had, frankly, change can be a good thing and change can be a bad thing. If you've had the same person in the organization for years and years and years and you've been audited and nothing's really come up and you've had various audits, then, you know, maybe things are fine. But sometimes if you've had the same person in place, maybe that's a good area to look at because that person's been there forever and maybe it hasn't had an in-depth look. The other side of that coin is if you have had change and you have somebody new in the position, maybe they've changed things up and you need to look at that. But you need to sometimes let that person be in place before you can come in and audit it. Because if they just came in like 2 months ago, if you come in and audit the books for the last 2 months, you could go back and audit the past, but if they've come in and made changes, then it doesn't make sense to jump in and start auditing something that's had a lot of change. Also, IT infrastructure, you know, what's going on in that area, and in particular departments. Process risk. This is really where our knowledge of governments comes really into play because there are certain processes and certain areas that are inherently more risky than others. And it's where we find as auditors when we go into audit governments, or if you go read the news, where do things usually occur? It's a lot of times in certain processes. And so we're looking at continuity and we use our judgment on which processes are risky. We also look at external factors. These can be, if there's a lot of legal issues, for example, grants have a lot of regulatory compliance to them, that might be a risky area. Sometimes things are not necessarily large, but public perception is really important. So you might have things that could come up within the city that if it wasn't being done right would look really bad if it got in the newspaper. So it may not even be a large dollar amount, but again, public perception is very important for a government entity. So we look at it from that perspective when we do our risk assessment. We also look at the various revenue sources. Some revenue sources are very easy to determine whether they're correct or not. The money comes from the state. You can go to the state website, you can get a confirmation, and you can see that, yes, that's clearly it. Other revenue sources, when you get into utilities and stuff, it's based on billing rates. There's often many factors in coming up as to what the revenue should be. And revenues, by their general nature, are inherently risky because that's, of course, where your cash and your checks are, and that's where the easiest thefts can occur. So again, when we sat there, and Rob and I, we went through this whole process, and then he and I really sat down and thought a lot about what we heard and where we thought the best area to focus the audits would be. And we came up with 5 areas, and the first one is public works. It's the osmosis construction project that you just finished, and we're going to go into these in more detail. But year 2 would be procurement and the purchasing card function. Year 3 is follow-up audits, and all the previous internal audits, there's never been really follow-up on those, so that is something that really should occur in a good internal audit environment. And finance, payroll, and timekeeping functions, big dollars, and asset management, which we're talking about asset management, all the physical assets. So Rob now is going to kind of go over why we determined several of these things to be higher risk and kind of what our objective is in covering these. And then also how we're going to go through our internal audit process to make sure that everything's been vetted before the report comes to you. Rob?
Good evening. So as Debbie said, we came up with what we judged to be, through the various factors that she's identified, what we consider to be the top 5 internal audits based upon these various risk factors. And we've bolded here for you the risk rationales to how we came up with our risk rating. So right away with the osmosis project, it's we refer to this as a construction contract compliance audit, and we'll get into a little bit more later on how we would specifically look at this project. But a big factor here is the financial significance. It's a $45 million plus project. The type of contract also presents it to kind of makes it pose more of a risk in that it's a cost reimbursable. That means it's not just based upon a fixed price that went through competitive bid processing, but the cost had to be supported throughout the process, throughout the project, through invoices. That makes it to be a higher risk item as well, because there's more judgment involved and more moving parts. And also, to our knowledge, there was not a closeout audit done at the end of the project, which takes a look back at the project, kind of goes through and says, how did what was billed match up with what was supported and according to the contract terms and conditions. So that's, for those various factors, we judged that the osmosis project would be a high risk rating. Procurement. So here we know there was a procurement audit done in the past by previous internal auditors, but in looking at the scope of that previous procurement audit, it was focused upon the contracting process and especially the procurement process, which are good things to focus on, and those are good things to do. But in looking at that, we did note that the purchasing card function itself, though, was not addressed, so that was not previously audited. And in our experience in doing many of these things, this tends to be an area that is high to moderate, because in this case, we noted there was over 100 cards that are out there being used. It's relatively significant magnitude. And because of the usability of the cards, these people having basically their own credit card, there's more risk that there could be misappropriation of assets. So this requires more focus, and it tends to be higher risk as well. And I do want to emphasize, when we say risk, we're talking in terms of before we get consideration of what specific controls might be in place, because we're at this higher level where, based upon just how it inherently is, the nature of it, this is the risk, and that's what we're talking about for each of these items. And here is something we think is very important as well. It's also high to moderate risk, and this is talking about follow-up. And what we have in mind here is, number one would be looking at those prior internal audits. We didn't see where there was steps taken specifically that we could identify to say, okay, in these previous audits were done, you had your management responses saying, here's how we're going to respond to those previous findings. But what about follow-up? What about going after the fact and finding out how, in fact, and when, in fact, were those recommendations actually implemented? So we would follow up on those, the most significant ones of previous internal audits, as well as looking at audits that we would have conducted during that time frame. And that's why this would be number 3, looking at the previous audits that we conducted and doing the same type of thing. We go back out to management and say, okay, we have the various recommendations, we have your responses, let's go and test and see that indeed you were able to successfully follow up and implement those changes. So that's what we mean by terms of follow-up of previous audits. Finance, specifically looking at the payroll timekeeping function. This high moderate, the biggest reason for this area is because payroll, true of all governments, is always the largest expenditure. And so, and additionally, in discussing this with management, parts of the process are manual, including the timekeeping process, and when more things that are manual lends itself to more errors. And also, this area was also not previously audited by internal auditors, so that's why this is high moderate. And finally, the top 5, asset management. Again, you have the dollar significance of the population. As Debbie talked about, here's where reputation risk really comes in, because you can think there's a lot of small dollar items out there that could go missing, and maybe dollar-wise it's not significant, but reputational-wise, if things go missing, then people wonder what's going on and how are things being managed if assets are going missing, even if they're of a smaller dollar type. And again, this is also an area that was not previously audited by internal auditors. Now, those were the top 5 that we were proposing to you based upon our judgment. That's just in our judgment. We were saying to you are the top 5 audit areas that we're recommending, but we recognize that we're proposing this to you, and of course it's up to you. It's your decision. So we also want to present you with other internal audits we proposed based upon risk in other areas that you might want to consider as well if the top 5 aren't the 5 that you choose. And so that's what we're doing here. These are additional internal audits that you might do instead of the ones we proposed in your judgment, or maybe at a later time if you want to do additional audits. These are other ones we're saying you ought to consider. First one up here, and these themselves are not in a particular order of priority, but we just present these additional other areas to consider. The clerk utilities review we said is high moderate. This has to do with the significant level of the financial impact, complexity of the process. Debbie referred to this in terms of the billing involved in that process. But again, this is mitigated by the fact that there was an internal audit that was performed not too long ago in January 2013. Fleet, we said, was moderate. It's moderate level of financial impact. There is a potential misappropriation of assets, and again, not previously audited by internal auditors. Procurement, though this was audited in 2012, 2013, as you know, especially in government, this is always an area of focus. There's always area of risk in this regard, especially when it comes to compliance with the procurement statutes, whether your own policies and procedures, which of course you want to make sure are in compliance with the state statutes from that bidding, and especially the competitive solicitation process are all very important. Accounts payable, moderate. Here, some of the key things that can happen are duplicate payments, again, misappropriation of assets, and again, not an area not previously audited. IT, though there was a positive report, which is good, not too long ago by the previous internal auditors in January 2017, and because it was recent, this is obviously always an area of concern, but because it was very recent and it was positive, that's why it's not in our top 5. If that wasn't the case, if there wasn't a positive report and it wasn't this recent, it would have been one of our top 5. So you explain why that's there. But at the same time, we still put it on the list because there's 2 types of internal audits generally that are often done. One is kind of a general control environment where you kind of look at it as a whole. And then the one that needs to be done more periodically is what they call a penetration testing. We know that as you hear in the news, so-and-so got hacked today and lost all this personal data. Right? That's always a big concern. I know that's a concern for you as a public entity. And so it's good to have regular penetration testing to make sure that you're protected against that and to update that periodically. Remote cash collections, this was done by a previous internal auditor in 2014, 2015. Again, here, we're talking about cash collections at various areas. I mean, usually when it's decentralized like that, there's more risk associated with that. But one thing we noted, there wasn't any one place where it was materially concentrated in any particular location. So that helps mitigate that risk. But still, the fact that you have multiple places where you're collecting cash, that proposes risk that we said is moderate to low. And the reason it's moderate to low and not moderate is because there was one performed in 2014 and 15. So that covers, what our process was and identifying the top 5 internal audits and the risk reasons we have for you and those additional internal audits for you to consider. Now, just to cover at a high level, just to give an idea as to what our approach with respect to each one of these areas. And we're just going to talk about the top 5, but it'd be similar to what we do with other areas if you were to choose other areas from the list. The osmosis plant project. Here, the distinction here is, as opposed to the other internal audits, it's sort of an internal audit, it is, but it's going to look outward, okay? Different from the other audits. We're going to focus the attention of this audit, that's why we call it contract compliance. We're going to get the contract itself from the contractor and focus on looking at, did the contractor who did the construction, did they conform to the terms and conditions of the contract? Did they bill you as the city appropriately according to the terms and the conditions of the contract? Okay, so the focus then is making sure you got what you paid for from the contractor. And it doesn't mean there's any malice or anything deceptive going on there necessarily. Just there could be errors that get made, mistakes. It's a big project. Mistakes happen. So we want to make sure that was accurately done. And so the 2 key things we do in that regard is we get a hold of the contract, we look at the terms and conditions, and we say, what are those economic compliance requirements that we need to look at and test? And then we get their job costs, which is basically, it's like getting their GL. Like you have your general ledger with all your financial data. We get their job costs. That's really their general ledger. And we look at their records as opposed to what the bills they send to you. Okay, because what they send to you as a bill is just that. It's a bill. It's an invoice. Here we're looking at their cost records because that's what they're recording as what the real cost is. And we look at it and do our internal audit from that perspective. The purchasing card here, again, the objective is now we're talking more about the traditional internal audit. We're looking at the controls around your purchasing card function. We're looking at that the controls and the policies and the procedures are accurate and complete, well designed. And once we determine that, then we go ahead and test those policies and procedures against what's going on. So we pull our samples, we look at important things like what's the setup process, how did it get approved, how did it get decided who the cardholder would be. We look at how are those monthly statements reviewed, what receipts are being included. Is the process that's been set up, is it being properly approved, signed off on, and supported throughout? And then an additional thing we do, which is a little bit extra, is we do some really, we think are very effective analytics using computer-assisted techniques to look at such things as anomalies. You can through data analysis, and something that tends to be one of the bigger risks when you have a P card is, think about it, you have a personal limit of $500, individual limit. That means I go to Walmart, buy something for $4.98, I check out, I get back in line again, buy something for $4.98, so on, so on. That's a split transaction, okay? So you can run data analysis and you can pick up on things like that. Follow-up audits, I kind of already got into this. I've already described what this is for you. So just some of the procedures we'll begin by having interviews with relevant management staff. Simple question is, we have the list of follow-up items from previous audits. What's the status? Oh, we've done all those things. Okay, thanks, we walk away. No, okay? We do procedures. We sit down and say, okay, show us what you've done, and we do some testing, some sample testing, to see that these were actually implemented in line with what the recommendations were. Payroll, timekeeping. Again, we're looking at the internal controls around the payroll process, looking at the proper application of the policies and procedures, including any applicable local and Florida statutes. We do more procedures than are up here. We just wanted to give you a couple of bullets as to what we do. We do more than this, but 2 of the key ones are we'll validate the employee pay rates and deductions, make sure those are accurate, and we'll also review the timesheet processing. And again, looking for that proper review and approval because it's so important that people's time is properly accounted for. And in government, it's especially the overtime, right? Making sure that's properly being approved and only worked when necessary and under the awareness of the proper supervisor. Asset management, again, the objective is really the same here. We're always looking at the controls around it. We're looking at policies and procedures, making sure they're being applied properly. Some typical procedures used is we'll look at the maintenance of the property records, what kind of property records are being maintained, because the statutes require a certain type of way of maintaining those records, as you know. Proper tagging and capitalization of the additions. Review for proper tracking. How are we keeping track of the dispositions when we dispose and sell of the assets, including any surplus property, if you hold any kind of surplus and you have sales for that. And then, of course, we make sure that the proper procedures and process and controls are in place for doing those annual physical inventories. This last part here, and this is the last part then of our presentation, here is what we're describing here is our overall approach now for every single audit we do. Okay, and this was actually in the original proposal. And just to put this back in front of you again, that was a while ago, to remind you what our overall approach is as we do each one of these audits, whether that's the purchasing card audit, whether it's the payroll audit, or whichever internal audit it is. This is the three-phased approach that we apply to each one, so you'll know exactly what our approach is. The first thing we do is we have to understand the process itself. We have to get a thorough understanding, whether it's the P cards. We have to know what are the policies and procedures. We get copies of those. We sit down and talk to those who do the process. We talk to, first of all, would be the director first. Then we talk to people who do the process, and we get a complete understanding of what that process is and the key steps that are performed, and we document that so we know exactly what we're looking to test. We then go ahead and, as part of this, we'll have additional interviews. Once we understand the process, then we'll get out and ask specific questions to see what management, as well as the staff performing them, what they understand they're supposed to be doing. That sets us up for the second phase, so then we're ready to then do our detailed testing. Now we understand the process, we've documented it, we know what the policies and procedures are, we know the controls, we know how they're all supposed to work. Now we're going to test to see if they're working as they're intended. And so we select our samples and we perform our various tests to see indeed are those controls and the compliance factors being followed as they're intended to be. The third point is very important we do with each one of our audits is we want to make sure that we're always transparent and that once we identify potential areas of improvement or findings is to vet those. And by vet, we don't mean we're not influenced by those trying to change our minds, but we need to be accurate in what we've found. And so we vet them from an accuracy standpoint with the process owners, those actually doing it. And of course, we will always vet them with a management within that particular department before we would come to you. And so that leads us to the final phase in phase 3, and that's reporting. Of course, the ultimate reporting entity is, of course, we report these to you. You are the one we're reporting to as the board, and you will be the one who, of course, review and approve and implement this report. And so we go through these steps. We draft the report first. It'll have these various elements in it. Like I said, point 2, we always have that exit conference with management, again, as that final vetting process. So what we bring to you, last thing we want to have happen is present this report, have somebody from management say, wait a minute, I didn't know about that. That wasn't run by me. That's not helpful to anybody. So we make sure we vet it with them and make sure that we have that exchange. And we go ahead as well as we'll have our observations in there, or areas of improvement, our recommended actions, and then management response. And we work really hard to work with them because, the observations are what they are in most cases, right? If they're accurate, they are what they are. But the recommendations, there's different ways to implement observations. So we work with management and we present to them our proposed recommendations. Sometimes we work with them and find that there might be a more efficient way, or from their vantage point, they might say, what about if we agree with your observation, what about if we tweak the recommendation? Maybe, what if we do it this way? And we think about it, if that makes sense to us and still addresses the observation, then we're happy to do that. And that's what leads to having managed responses then. You want to have managed responses where you work best you can, where those responses are basically agreeing with the recommendation and a clear action plan to accomplish that. And then we provide the final report to you all, of course. That's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, both of you, for this report. I'm looking forward to see the evaluation completed and the recommendations to present it to us. One question that I have: do you have a time limit how long it will take for each year before the recommendations become available to us?
Well, it's going to depend on how long, we will, once you tell us what you want us to audit, each audit's going to take a different amount of time. And so we will move as quickly as possible once we start an audit to complete the audit and get vet the process and everything. I would say from start to finish, 2 months for most of them, maybe 3 months at most. Again, it just depends if we run into some obstacles when we're in there auditing. We have to get more information, or we have to get information from some outside source. But usually about 2 to 3 months from start. It could go faster than that. But again, the process that Rob explained, it just takes the planning, the design of the program, the vetting, getting it back to you all, and going through that process takes a little time.
Thank you. Your concentration the first year is going to be on the osmosis construction, being that was completed several years ago. Is that too late to recover some of the funds?
Right. So it depends upon, in the contract, there's, in the standard construction contract, there's always a right to audit clause. And the right to audit clause is always, it's typically 3 to 5 years, minimum 3 years. So as long as the contract has that right to audit clause, and it's within it, and it's 3 years or more, which, like I said, I've never seen a right to audit clause less than 3 years, then it would be, we would have that ability.
Thank you. Any commission comments? Commissioner Carr?
I've got a couple. Can I just ask for clarification? Have you seen that or requested that contract yet? I mean, if this is the first one we're going to be looking at, I think that would be an important part to start.
Yeah, we have not seen that yet. We wanted to request that, this be an important audit, and so we have asked for that. We have not yet seen that contract, but there is almost always got to be a right to audit clause in the contract. So I guess it would be, we would only do that audit contingent on that being in the contract.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big ball to drop.
Yes.
To be honest, that if you're coming to present and making a recommendation, if you don't know what that is,
Yes.
I completely agree. I think it's a great thing to target and go after. But if you're making the presentation before us right now, I think that would be something you would know before you brought it up as the number one recommendation. So at that point, if that right to audit clause is, say, 2 years, 1 year, whatever it might be, out of that, then you'd come back and say, where do you want us to hit first? Would that happen?
Yeah, the right to audit clause was going to be our first recommendation to do the osmosis plant, because we wanted to do that very quickly because of the 3 to 5 year. And so that would be our first, and then we would go down second, third, fourth, fifth. If for some reason that was not available to be audited, then we would go to number 2, because we've put them in order of priority of how we believe the risk is.
Okay.
On the audits.
Thank you. Just a couple questions too. Is there an ability, like duplicate payments, for instance, that kind of falls into some of the things that you're looking at with the osmosis plant? Is there a way, I mean, that's generally a program that you run. I don't think there's a lot of man hours. Is there a way to do like a duplicate payment along with the payments that you're looking at already with the osmosis? If it's a program that you run internally, or you don't have to spend a whole lot of man hours in that, is that possible to add that to that as well?
Yeah, the short answer is, like I said, we don't list all the steps under there, and that's one of the things we do.
I'm just saying if we could, because I know that was one of the things that you talked about, and maybe not a more moderate impact area was accounts payable.
Accounts payable, but you're asking about the osmosis plant, right?
But I'm talking about if we could lump all the invoices in, since it's the program you're already running within the osmosis side. Is that an area where, I'm not saying we're asking to do a full audit in the accounts payable, but maybe look at that area, because that is a risk still. Since you're already running the program, just to add, I don't know how many more, maybe another 1,000 account payable at the program you guys run, right? So it's not someone going through line by line.
That wouldn't be in the osmosis.
Yeah, that wouldn't. The osmosis would be very different, because that example is where we're actually looking at the project. We're actually looking at the contractor's records, not your internal records.
Okay.
So that would be different.
Okay. I was just thinking there might be an opportunity to, if we're looking at duplicate payments, to also pull in some other payments to other vendors as well.
Yeah, probably the place that makes sense where we could do it would be probably the P-card one, procurement, since we're already going to be looking at that.
Got it.
Yeah, we could, to answer your question in that regard, because it is computer assisted, right,
Another thing too, if we could ask, in one of the years, I'm not sure where this would be placed. I know that you mentioned that our IT department just had an audit recently. If I recall, you guys had you're pretty excited about your IT team, that you guys have hackers or whatever you want to call them that try to bounce in people's firewalls and such. It would be, I think, a good idea to potentially have it at least tested. I mean, at some point, one of the years, just to, if you spend a few hours just trying to ping through or whatever it might be, just to expose some areas. Again, not a full audit like you might have listed as a moderate or low impact area, but just as a, hey, by the way, we looked at this. It was a couple hours during this year, so on. So there's only a couple recommendations, but everything else I think looked pretty good. So thank you.
Commissioner Sieber.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I'm a little surprised that some of these internal audits were not completed in the past. And so thank you for bringing these risks to us. And like the magnitude of cards that have not been audited in the past, so I would see that as a pretty high risk. And payroll still being done manually instead of automated. I think we definitely need to look into doing something to change that, because most government offices or places do have automated systems. I'm looking forward to the action plan. When do you think you will come back to us with that?
Well, we kind of would need your approval as far as if these are the audits that you would wish for us to do. And then if you do that, then we would start doing them one at a time. And again, you know, we would go with year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. Could certainly include the purchasing with the P card, and do some of that, you know, not the whole thing, like you said, because that's a whole separate audit, but do some of that testing. So if you gave us approval to move forward, then we would start with each of those audits in that order. And then, like Rob said, we come in here and we design an audit program and get an understanding of your controls and all in that particular area. So we would do them one at a time.
Start with the reverse osmosis.
Yes, that would be a recommendation. Again, with the timing, the dollar amount, there's also the potential, we never guarantee it, there's a potential to even bring some money back to the city. But we don't promise that, because it just depends on how the contract's written. And sometimes also something important on that osmosis plan is that we go through the contract and we make recommendations to potential future contracts too. So if you were to build something else new, you can use our work to build on future contracts and make them stronger and better to protect the city.
And will you be giving us additional costs from your end when you start each project? What will the dollar amount be if it's added to for each different audit?
Yeah, we have a budget that has been put together, and that has been approved, the city budget, on how much you want to spend each year on internal audit services. So we're going to work within your budget and
So nothing extra
do
for
what we
these?
can do in that, yeah.
All right.
And if you want to pick up, you know, hopefully, once you start seeing our audits, you will be thrilled and you will say, this is well worth it, and maybe we want to spend more money and dig into some more audits. That's our hope.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank
Panther?
you. Is the 5-year plan that you've laid out, is that typical for entities our size?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
The 5-year audit plan that you've laid out, is that typical for entities our size?
Yes, I mean, it really, we have to work in internal audit based on your budget. We have some clients that have quite a bit more that they want to spend, and they want to get more audits done a year. So, you know, we would go faster in the audit process, basically. Like you could see, we outlined a lot of audits that we think should be done here, but we're auditing as we go along based on the budget that's available to do those audits. So.
And I assume we can adjust mid-year as necessary, right?
Absolutely.
Any adjustments are the purview of this board, correct?
Yes, absolutely. You can adjust it. You could change it. I mean, right now this is just a proposal. So after year 1, something I hope not, but something could come up here and you could say, hey, we need to change this and we need to jump into this next year. It's a higher priority. So we're going to adjust with you as we go along here with whatever your desires are. We do work for you and we report to you. So know that, we're here for you. I do appreciate that you all take the internal audit serious. We do have some cities your size, we do external audits where they don't even have any internal audit. So I do think it's good that you're taking the opportunity to do some internal audit. So again, you asked me, is this the right size? Everybody makes their own choice on how much money they want to spend, but I do think it's a good idea to do some of this because it says that somebody is looking outside and watching and coming up with recommendations that really we're not here. Auditors sometimes have a bad name because people think we're there to hit them over the head and come in and find things, but we're really here to help, especially in the internal audit. We're here to make recommendations that's going to make this a stronger city and make the department stronger. So we have a very good reputation of working with the people in your departments to come up with solutions and make things work better, not cause issues. And I have seen auditors before that come in and good luck because your people, might be leaving the minute that the auditors keep hounding on them. So we're very cognizant about that also.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Kichter?
Thank you. I want to thank you again for the presentation. I look forward to working with you. I know, we had the other auditor. How many years did we have our other internal auditor? 3, 5? About 3, yeah. And so this is, to change internal auditors is a challenge for all of us, I know. So I look forward to working with you all. And I want to thank you for putting this risk assessment questionnaire in here. So you use this on each audit that you do?
Well, this is one that we developed. We don't use it on each audit afterwards. This was to gather data for our risk assessment process. So we use this to understand, like each department, they filled this checklist out for us, which made our interview process much more efficient, effective, by going and having them fill this checklist out for us.
And that's how you gathered all this data. So my only other question is, you have year number 3 of follow-up audits from previous internal audits. Is that something that we might want to consider looking at sooner? Because there was recommendations in these audits, and we want to make sure that our staff, follow through on these recommendations. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah.
I don't think, but our audits weren't all that bad, but still there were recommendations.
Right. I think that's something we put it there where we thought, based upon the significance of the recommendations, there were some that were high. It just kind of depended. But there were responses to each one saying these things were done. The good news is it didn't lack response from management where you didn't even know if management did anything with them. So I think that's good to know. Man did respond saying we've done these things. So there was a response from management. But as far as the follow-up goes, we didn't see that being done. So as far as should that be the 3rd year or should it be the 2nd year, should it be sooner? That's kind of a judgment call. And, if you felt you wanted to do it sooner, certainly you could. We picked that year because we thought that we could cover those previous one as well as address ones from the first couple audits that we did. That's how we came up with the 3rd year. Okay. So it's a judgment call. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. After the first year is completed, are we planning to have some kind of a workshop we can actually look and see through the processes and some of the disconnects that you found and what are we going to do to fix them?
Yes, we'll present our year 1 report to you, which if we approve this plan, if you approve this plan, we do the osmosis plant first, which is really more looking at the outside contractor, but again, helping you with any future contract agreements and such. So we would go over that report with you at a meeting here. Mm-hmm. And then obviously we could readdress at that point, do you still want to go with the plan year 2, because then we would be launching into that one.
You want to say something?
Yeah, Mayor, I think that's a good idea to maybe do an open meeting to the public,
sure.
So some type of workshop fashion for this specific part, and then have a summary at a commission meeting so it doesn't maybe drag out longer for other agenda items and public comments. So
I agree. I think it's very important. Well, thank you. We are now going to the public comments.
Peter Lax, 514 Ashland Avenue. Just want to put a few things in perspective here. I'm not sure if you're really aware of it. I thank you for complimenting us on doing internal audits, but we do have a portion in our charter that requires it.
Delakas, please address the board here.
Well, I wanted to make sure they heard what I was saying. So basically, if you didn't hear, it's in our charter that we are supposed to have internal audits. In fact, it was originally we were supposed to have an internal auditor, but that was changed. Now, as far as a few things for the board, you have an attorney here. Utilize him. Is there a right to audit clause in that contract? Can you provide that information? And if not, I would like to see that the board gets that information from our attorneys. Secondly, as Commissioner Banther brought out, you do have the control. You are the board. You set the budget, you set priorities. And if Commissioner Carr believes that we need to look at our card usage, and I understand what you're saying about double billing, what they're saying is one's for looking at their contracts and you want to look what goes through the city, and I agree totally that that should be something done. And if you think it's important, you move it up to 2 or 3. Same thing as far as what Commissioner Slattery Kisco, I'm sorry, Sue, brought up about previous audits. Where have they gone? Just like a lot of things we've had the city do, they end up on a shelf, neglected. So it is in your control to determine the priorities such that you determine where you want to look. And as the lady here mentioned, takes 2 to 3 months to do one, maybe. Well, there's nothing stopping you to do 2 or 3 a year. If you want to get caught up, do the public works, do the credit card procurement, do the internal auditors. That's 3. You can do 4 months, 4 months, 4 months. You can spread it out. It's a matter of your priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Here none. Thank you very much for the presentation. Well, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
The item number 2 on the agenda is project and dredging update. Bob Robinson, the project administration.
Excuse me. Good evening. Bob Robertson, Project Administration Department Director. I'm here to provide a brief update on some of the projects that are currently underway. This verbal update, no PowerPoint, is based on the project status spreadsheet that we publish weekly to the city website. It can be found, for those listening, by navigating to the projects page on the city website, or by simply Googling Tarpon Springs project updates. It's the first thing that comes up. The newest version is I've divided that document up into 2 sections. The prototype version has some errors where I swapped the sections, so I apologize. I'll get that straightened out in the next version. But those 2 sections are active projects and completed projects. And tonight I'm going to highlight a few of the active projects. And Mr. Mayor, I was thinking as I go through each of the projects, I'll pause to give a chance for questions on each of the projects, or if you prefer, I'll just go through the whole thing.
I think it's better if you go the whole thing.
Okay.
And then we'll come back to it.
No problem.
Thank you. Be easier.
All right. So before I jump into that, I'd like to just, if you don't mind, put in one quick plug. Recently, Gary Sherman, my project supervisor, retired from the city after 16 years of very dedicated service, leaving big shoes to fill. I've had the job posted for about a month, and I've only received a few applicants. So for anyone listening, if you know someone with engineering or project management background who might be in the market for a good job, please send them to the City Human Resources page for more information. Thank you for that. So quickly, on the projects, the first project I'll touch on is the Anklo Dredge. Pieces are in place for this project to start moving forward. However, progress to this point has stalled a bit as the Army Corps awaits congressional approval of the Contributive Funds Agreement. Yes, we're still waiting on that. That's the agreement that essentially just allows us to pay the Army Corps to do the engineering and permitting. As I reported last time, the Army Corps has used some of its own discretionary funding to start some of the work on the project, so we didn't lose much time. They did a new bathymetric survey, soils testing, and a cultural resource survey. But now the Army Corps has pretty much done all they can do without this Contributive Funds Agreement. I'm told now that Congress has that agreement, and hopefully the Corps will get the green light soon to keep moving on the project. Regarding state funding that we requested for the spoil site, we didn't get good news recently regarding the Florida Job Growth Grant funding application that we put in. The state told us that our project was not competitive due to a limited job creation and had a low return on investment. The mayor, Karen Lemons, and I made another run at trying to convince the state that we did meet those requirements, put a letter together in which we argued that preventing job loss should be and is equally, if not more valuable than creating new jobs. And also that by funding only 13% of the project cost, which is what we were asking for, the state would essentially be getting a $5 million infrastructure project for only a small $676,000, relatively small contribution from the state. I did call the state today to follow up, but was unable to reach anyone, but I'll stay on top of that. In the meantime, we do have an opportunity in front of us that I'm trying to take advantage of. Due to the effects of Hurricane Irma, the Army Corps has identified that shoaling in the channel has worsened. And as a result, the Corps has made a case to requesting dredging funding for this fiscal year, fiscal 18. If you remember, we were looking at a fiscal 20 target for getting this started. So I was very excited by that. And as a result, we contacted Congressman Bilirakis' office to ask for his support, and he mobilized his staff quickly, and they assembled a letter getting the Greater Tampa Bay Area delegation to sign that. Charlie Crist, Dennis Ross, Kathy Castor, Daniel Webster, and Vern Buchanan. This letter was forwarded to Colonel Kirk, the district commander at the Army Corps in Jacksonville, and just today was forwarded to the acting Assistant Secretary of the Army, Mr. Ryan Fisher, in Washington, D.C. It's my hope that the project can be mobilized this year, which would save us quite a bit of money, partially offsetting what could be a lack of state funding for the project. That's a bit of a long update for a single project. I apologize for that, but I thought this one might need a little bit more detail. So if you want, we'll circle back to that one as I get through the rest of the projects here. Quick update on the Ring Avenue parking lot and Brick Street project. This one, you've probably seen construction underway. It's the scope of the project is rebuilding the Brick Street between Lemon and Tarpon, and adding some clearly designated street parking, adding new stormwater infrastructure, and building a new parking lot in the old Public Works yard. Derek Silver, my site inspector, is on site daily, and this project is expected to be completed in early spring. I'll touch on the downtown/docks walkable zones. This is a project for new and repaired sidewalks and curbs on Athens Hope and Grand Boulevard. We did the design internally, saving a little bit of money there, and that project is currently out to bid. West Wind's Grassy Point Reclaimed Water, that's bringing new reclaimed water services to more than 300 homes. The project is still in design, is about 90% complete. We're looking to finalize that project and put it out to bid in January. Gross and Pent Street Stormwater Project, design is in progress. We're about to reach a 60% design point with permit applications being submitted in a couple of weeks by our design engineer. And two more project updates for you. The pool project, The design team is now proceeding towards final design and final project pricing. And just as I've mentioned before, the project is basically we're keeping it to bare bones to keep the pricing within budget. It includes all the essentials. It'll have an 8-lane lap pool with minimum dimensions, length, width, depth, a shallow training pool, lockers, showers, a concession building, and an office. Extras like bleachers and canopies and those kinds of things will be included in the project as additive alternates. So if we can afford them, we'll put them in, but everything else is getting trimmed out. And the last one is an update on Mears Boulevard. That project is essentially split into 2 pieces. We have a piece that's being done by the developer. That's the section between Alt 19 and Diston. And then the city section, where we're doing improvements and upgrades between Diston and US 19. On the developer section, that will move forward when the developer completes final review responses with the city on the Mears Town Center, because those are projects that are linked. Those reviews are still in the works. We're trying really hard to get that completed with the developer. And then on the city section, that one's currently under design with one of our engineer records. We discovered a right-of-way discrepancy, and I'm working with the engineer to either design around the discrepancy or to find a way to clear up the discrepancy by either purchasing some property or the like. So a lot of issues, a lot of things going on, I should say. So that's, I think, a handful of projects. We'll stop there and we'll go back for questions.
Thank you. And thank you for the update. Also, I want to thank you for the great job that you do.
Thank you.
I have quite a few questions and comments that I want to make.
Great.
And I will start with number 1, the Anklo River dredging.
Yes, sir.
As you stated, we are still looking for funding from the state to lease the spill site. Even if the state does not assume their responsibility, in the worst case scenario, we'll be using penny for Pinellas. And I think Mr. Licurtis already commented that in the previous meeting, right, Mr. Licurtis?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So we're not going to hold the project back. In regards to the funding for the Army Corps of Engineers, last weekend, I had a discussion with Congressman Billy Rakes. He also sent an email to everyone stating his effort is going well. And he met with the House Appreciation Chairman, Congressman Freelinghausen, and also the director of the Army Corps of Engineers. And he is scheduled to have another meeting sometime this week.
Okay.
He tells me now that the project is on the top of the list, and he feels pretty good that we're going to get funded for that. So I want to again thank you to Congressman Billy Rakes for his efforts. The item number 6, the Ring Avenue, the parking lot, and also the Brick Street. Can you tell me how the local business are affected, knowing that the street is now blocked? I'm sure that Gary was constantly talking to them, and it was accommodating their needs. How are we doing there?
Yeah, and Derek has taken up the mantle of that as well, and he's doing a good job with that. They all have his number. They contact him when there's questions. The contractors doing their best to keep the businesses open. An example of that is phasing some of the work, so they leave part of the street untouched while they work on one part of it, and they're going to fix the north part and then come back and, and then adjust it. Talk too much with my hands. Guess that's too much Sicilian in me. So they are working together to try to accommodate their needs.
Thank you. The project number 7 is the some of the lights on Athens Street have been installed, but they're not working. Do you know when they will become operation?
I'm aware of, I think we had ordered 3 or 4 lights to be installed. We don't have an electrician on that is available right now. He's been out sick, and I think we're looking to, working with procurement, to possibly get an electrician contract so that we can bring services in to do that. I think that's what's holding us up on that one.
What I was going to suggest is to bypass the ones that the lights are not installed, just to bypass the circuit. That way, the lights that we already have in place to work.
Okay,
because
take
it's
a look
pretty
at that.
dark over there.
We'll take a look at that.
Next question is, again, on Athens Street and Oak Hope Street. I'm gonna ask Mr. Licouris. Both of those streets, they have a lot of traffic. Actually, they're connecting the two business communities, the downtown with the sponge dock. Are they any scheduled to be repaved?
No, we haven't done the new, we'll get that to you when we do the new repaving. I don't have the list of,
Okay.
right now, we gotta finish up the project that we've had, to do with the sidewalks and stuff, and then I can,
Okay,
have to
because
do
they're
one
in
at-
pretty bad shape.
we have a lot of those, so.
Yeah, I know.
So we do them every year. They're prioritized, they're put in a list, they're brought to you, and then you decide. So I'm sure they'll be somewhere on that list, and then they come for your purview at that proper time.
Okay. Project number 17, Mr. Robinson, this is the South Spring sidewalks, South Spring Boulevard sidewalks. If you please give us an update and tell us about the different options and designs that we have in process.
Sure. This project is exploring options for increasing pedestrian safety along South Spring. One of the options that is potentially converting that to a one-way street. The next step that we're looking to do is to solicit public comment on that, particularly those that are in the vicinity. I'm preparing door hangers and information about the proposed improvements, and what I'm going to do is provide a link and an invitation to those recipients to log into a website with a survey where we can get everyone's opinion so they can see pictures and images of some of the concepts. The framework is set up already for that online survey, and I'll be putting that out, pulling that together for distribution hopefully before Christmas. And I'll share that through your office and the city manager's office for your information.
Thank you. Another project that I'd like to ask you to give us an update is to correct the stormwater problem that we have on the Decanis Boulevard. I know that we're looking on several options. One of the options is to install check valves. Another option is to install a stormwater lift station, or both. Can you expand on that, please?
Sure. This is a project Public Works has initiated with our stormwater engineer, and that engineer has been doing an alternatives analysis to look at some of the options that you've just mentioned. I just got some brand new information from the engineer today. One of the first options is, just like you said, looking at they're called Tide Flex check valves, and basically the purpose of those is to keep the river from backing up into the street. And ballpark cost on those is around $100,000 to $120,000 to install 3 of those. Other alternatives include expanding the storm pipes and adding more infrastructure to help during storm events. And then, of course, the final alternative that you mentioned would be doing all those things with the check valves, with the bigger storm pipes, adding a vault and a pump station. And that one we're looking at more than $1 million as an alternative. These are, like I said, this is fresh off the press here, but and I'm going to be looking these alternatives over with Public Works and trying to decide if on a path forward. I think I have a feeling we'll have more meetings to discuss this one.
Sure. Yeah, this is only the beginning of that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank you for everything you do. Thank you for your work.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Panther.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Bob. You do a great job keeping everything on track. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Obviously, the Anklet River Dredge project is my most passionate area. It is disappointing that the state has proven to be little help so far. We always hope something will change, and it can. I did ask Sprawls to be here tonight, but I guess they're in session today. So I guess our most promising thing, or the only promising thing really, is this emergency money that we might get for 2018. Being that 2018 is a few weeks away, shouldn't we know soon, or how's that work with their budget cycle?
Yeah, it's a process where the project is now listed in what we'll call it a short list or a high priority for what they call work plan funds for fiscal 18 in the Army Corps, and The Army Corps will do those projects if they get the authorization from the Assistant Secretary of the Army, the ASA. To get that, we need some congressional support, and that's where that letter that I mentioned comes in from Bilirakis and the delegation. So it's my hope that that's going to move things forward and get the authorization to start the dredge this year. I don't know any more information about when I'm going to find that out, but I'll keep calling my contact and stay on top of it.
They can start quickly. I mean, it seems like it'll take a while to mobilize. I mean, can they just?
Certainly. I mean, the design's not even done yet, so there's going to be some overlap. But I would think I would think that if they could allocate the funds now and encumber it in this fiscal year, even if the dredge didn't physically start until the late next summer or late past into the early part of the next fiscal year, that it is already encumbered in fiscal 18.
Correct. And though the mayor's correct that we have the penny for Pinellas money to use for the spoil site, which our city manager was wise in reserving that is, there's opportunity cost there, and that's funds we can't use for infrastructure, for the sponge docks. That money could be very well spent there, but now we have to use it for a spoil site. I'm glad we have that, but we should all keep that in mind when we talk to our state, officials. That's not just money that we weren't going to use. So one thing I do want to do, Mark, the Marine Commerce Committee needs to meet again, whether to decide if they want to stay as a board, if they want to dismantle, or what they want to do. What kind of schedule can we get them on to meet again so we can get their thoughts on what they want to do?
I'm not sure because it's not my board. I know Karen Lemons has called and expressed to them that they need to meet. I'll check with her and see what progress that is on there.
Okay, well, I think they need to meet again to decide if they want to remain a board and do sunshine law and abide by that, and they feel they're more effective that way, or are they more effective in a private function? And if anybody on that board wants to step down in a private function, then we would need to fill the slots. But that's a pretty big brain trust on one board, so I don't want that to just be dormant. And I think we have some lobbying to do here on this effort. So this continues to be my main focus in the last year and a half that I'm here in this seat. It's our largest economic driver here in Tarpon Springs, and we should remind everyone that we work with, from Gus Bilirakis on down, that that's just a priority. It's not just a tourist attraction there. Over 50% of the fish in Tampa Bay come from our docks. It is a working port, and to be mindful of that. My other issue is the high school pool, where we're building a pool on somebody else's property. Did they add that in your notes here? Did the school board resolve their funding issue on 11/1 at that meeting?
When you say funding issue, when you're talking about the comment
Over budget, or there was?
Right, and yes, we have. It took some effort on my part to focus them on it, and that's partly why we wound up with the bare bones, because they were essentially ready to give up on the project because the numbers were so far off. And I said, no, there's a way we can do this. Let's just trim this all back. We'll put things in ad alternates, and now we're within about 9% of the budget, which for me at this point, at 50% design point, is on budget. So it took some effort, but we got there.
Tarpon Springs logic is.
That's what we've had to do in this case.
The more south you go, it
kind
of dwindles. So anyway, I'm in support of it as is, but like I said before, I will not entertain any further contract extensions, because this ties up, I think, what, 1.5 million of our penny money for this project. So I think it'll be great if it happens, but hopefully the school board has resolved their issues, like you said, and it can be ready for next summer. The last thing I had, and it might have been on here, so I'm sorry if you mentioned it, but Court Street, I see the white stripe parking. Are we going to do anything else aesthetically, or?
Well, what we've been looking at is we wanted to test it with the big events. So that's kind of if you would call it a rough draft layout and stuff. Also, the other thing we've discovered is that road, it's getting close for that road to be done. So we're thinking of, after we looked, snow place and this, we may want to expand the project and do the entire road. We don't want to sit there and put in landscape and curb it, and then next year come back in and tear up the road and tear up all the stuff we put in. So right now we're looking at, and probably, from everything I've seen, we're gonna be looking at turning that into a bigger project and do completely the whole road, the parking. We're comfortable. There's still some issues. On the first time it was tested, people thought it was too narrow, but in observation, it wasn't bad. It wasn't as bad as the first one. People got kind of used to it, but on Snow Place, it wasn't as bad. A lot of the problems is people aren't pulling up in the parking spaces, and that's what's cutting down the thing, because they've got a lot of space in there to educate. But it did improve from the first event looking to the so people get used to it, and we get permanent markers down there. But that's kind of a trial one, watching for this, watching Epiphany. And again, right now, I think I'm going to bring you back a bigger project to do the road, the land, do everything together and do the entire street instead of piecemeal and then tear it all up and do there. It just doesn't make any sense to do it that way.
No, I agree. So once that's finished and done, I do want to bring back up the Orange Street parking issue that I broached with you. I know we'd have to do some ordinance or whatever changes to increase parking on Orange Street. But after that's done, I'd like to maybe see what we can do with Orange Street Park.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob, for these updates. This is, I know it's quite a task to keep updated, continuously on all these projects, but we have a lot of projects going on, and Bob's doing a great job with it. So I really do appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Let me just touch base real quick on Court Street, what you were talking about. So you're talking about redoing the entire road?
Well, the road surface is in worse condition than we had thought before.
Okay.
That's why we've kind of changed that we probably need to put this into a road project and do the road itself, the paving, the repaving.
And we're still doing
the
the trees and the lighting and all that, still on board with that.
Yeah.
I had somebody question me about the painting in the road, for the parking and everything, and so I went out there and looked at it, but that's all just like temporary. So that's not this permanent, how it's actually going to be.
We're watching with the events coming up, the Thanksgiving, the Snow Place and Epiphany. We're watching, because obviously you get it all done, do the road and have it paved permanently, and then it doesn't work.
Right.
So we're trying to watch with it and see if there's any adjustments we need to make by actually watching it, because you can't get a true picture unless you watch it when you have the big event and it's in action.
It's just odd because one side of the street you're parking one way in a angle, and then the other side of the street it's parallel parking, so it's just kind of different, So, but I like to see it done. Mm-hmm. We utilize that area a lot these days. And I am happy to hear about the Anclote dredge, the river, that Congressman Bilirakis is involved again. I saw that email today, and it's encouraging. It's encouraging. So, and he knows the importance of the river to us. He definitely does. So I was happy to see that. I think everybody hit on everything that I wanted to. I know Mears. That's eventually going to be one of our evacuation routes. Is that correct? From, was that Florida Avenue all the way to 19? I believe that's supposed to be an evacuation route once it's all the way through.
I'm not aware of that, but that would make sense.
I think so.
Yeah, I know I campaigned on it.
Yeah.
So when do we anticipate that little bit being done?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, because there's not a lot left from what I remember.
Well, we're proceeding, and we're going to go, and we're going to do our part. We're working to get our part done. It's just the problems, and they waited so long, so they had to go through a bunch of permits again for the Mears portion because it was too long, and they made them do more. So they almost had to go back and start some things square one. So we're just waiting on them, but we're waiting on them for their portion, but we're not waiting on ours. We're going to get set done and get our portion ready and done. We're not waiting for their timeline anymore because we've got a big drainage issue at the basin there that we bought that piece, you as a commission bought that piece of land for. We need to get that in for the flooding and stuff. So we're going full forward, and hopefully they'll resolve their issues and get all their re-permitting done to start their portion.
Well, there's some major projects we're talking about putting in that area.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very important that that street gets put all the way through to 19 as soon as possible. So, and the other one I wanted to touch on is, the reclaimed water for West Winds. That's going to be nice when it's done because the residents there, I know Mr. Goen has fought hard for that for years, so he'll be real happy when that's done. But the other thing was the one-way on South Spring. Have we determined which way we're going the one-way yet?
No, and that's one of the questions I'm going to put in the survey.
Okay, because I have some people that are concerned about it already, and So I'm sure it'll be a hot topic here in town. So yeah, I look forward to that. You think that'll be up online sometime in December, maybe?
That's my goal, yeah. I'm gonna try to get it together next week so we can get it published.
Yeah, it's a
and
little
give
late,
people
but
time
you
to
see
think
with
about
all
it
these
over the
other
holidays.
projects and stuff, it got a little bit behind because of the priority he had to do on the other ones, but
Right.
it's still on the radar to do.
Awesome. Thank you again, Rob.
My pleasure.
Bob, you do a great job. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Commissioner Sieber?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you've already answered a lot of the questions. I wasn't going to talk about mirrors, but I do get asked often, when is that going to be completed? So I'm looking forward to us at least starting our end and then doing what we need to do, and hopefully the rest will get done. And the number one project is the funding for our dredge. Since our offer was vetoed last year by Governor Scott and we were declined by DEO, do we plan on trying to put in again for this next year in Tallahassee to get that kind of funding? Are we going to apply again?
I suppose that's an alternative route or additional. I guess we can try another bite at the apple.
But I thought it might not hurt to try again and see if it goes
Can't
through
hurt
this
to
time.
ask, yeah.
Yeah. Also, the docks and the walkable areas, Phase 2 and Phase 3, it's just so necessary. And I agree, of course, that the streets are in bad condition, but we do need to complete the sidewalks. And it looks like spring of 2018 for Phase 3. I'm like thinking that's a long time away. It can't be done any quicker, or
Well, we're in the winter right now, so this is next.
it's
in
just
a few months.
I guess it's not that far away.
It's pretty close.
I'm thinking tourist season coming up, and spring is when it hits us. So I was just trying to get that project done a little quicker.
I don't want to overpromise it.
Let's see. The pool. I'm disappointed that we're not going to have the diving boards for our dive team at Tarpon High, since we had problems with the school board approving their portion or coming up with their portion.
Well, quickly on that, we are leaving space for it, and they are leaving the running conduits and some of the minimum infrastructure that would need to be in the slab to allow for an installation of a future dive pool. So it could be done later, but
Yeah, everything.
there's just no way to afford
everything in this project that we wanted in the ideal thing. But again, we are one party. Two other parties, of course, a big party is the school board, and we're not getting anything else from them near future. We've also told the people who are involved with the booster groups and the stuff, encouraged them to go out and try to get us some possibly private funding and to go to them as groups. We've said that from the start that we've made our $1 million commitment, and the board was not going to reach that. Other people had to do their part. So, there's been a lot of people who they've talked to about going to. We keep encouraging them, but it's got time to the pool, and obviously we're not getting it, but we're building this thing so that if those funds come later and stuff, then we can get to the full project and stuff. But we've kind of been the only one in the ball game so far, and so we're going to build the basic one we need for our recreational stuff purposes, some school stuff, and to tell you the truth, since our money's in there, the first stuff we cut is the stuff that the school and stuff essentially needed. So most of all stuff's in there, but stuff to really make the partnership with the school, have meets and do that. Since there was no money coming in from them, then that's what we told them to cut. But again, the hope is somewhere, either through private funds or the school come around to decide to put some money back into North County and into the high school, that money come later, and the building it will be built so that can be added into the process, and we can do it in phases and have the total package at the end.
Yep.
I'm glad we're planning for that, because we do have a great dive team, and this is beneficial to the community, but also I got to think about our students and why we're doing this. So
Yeah.
I'm glad we're and Vice Mayor talked about our Maritime Committee getting back together, and I think that's important because we do need to lobby, and I think we do need to stay on top of Tallahassee
Well, I love Karen Call that, 'cause again, my feeling from the start, and I still feel it, that group and the talent we have on that board is a lot more valuable if they're not hamstrung with the public records law, with meetings, with not getting together and do it. And I'm hopefully when they come back on the board, that they see that and see what we need in the future.
Right.
You can always ravine at a different time. We get the dredge done and we're moving on to other projects, and they can always be put back into place by this board to go on. Right now, that group is more powerful if they're able to operate under, not under all the restraints you have when you're a board and you're under all the restraints of a board. You can't meet together, can't go on a boat together. And hopefully Karen, I'll tell Karen, I know she's broached it with them about meeting and talking about that.
Yeah.
But, and again, that's their choice either way, but I just think they're a lot more powerful lobbying, can do a lot of things. If that sunshine restrictions and stuff can be taken away from them, they can go, to bring this project to the end. They're better able to do that if we do it that way. So I'll tell Karen to try to get them together and meet soon.
Yeah, and just finally, South Spring, I get asked all the time, and it is a safety issue. So I'm looking forward to seeing the survey, and I know a lot of people have talked to me about it and want something done. So thank you for staying with that.
Will do.
Bob, thanks for the update. I think just to touch on a couple of things, most of the questions are already asked, so thank you for the ability to go last.
Anchorman.
The check valves and the sponge docks, I think that's money well spent. I would be interested to see the other areas of town, like Pinellas Avenue for an Ace Hardware floods, I know, and the King Tides around the bayous or some of the areas too. So to me, $125,000 for 3 of these check valves seems to be relatively cheap to prevent salt water from coming in the road and people driving through salt water not realizing it's salt water.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that one. Mark, you mentioned something about like Court Street coming back. Do you have a timeline of what the target is? If it's sometime in the spring or when you're going to have a full draw up, or what the discussion will be on that?
Probably after Epiphany. When we look at it, then we're going to come and we'll probably come back to you sometime right after Epiphany.
Okay.
Saying that, which I would say if it was now and have a little more analysis that we'd probably want to do a complete road project on Court Street, as opposed to just the landscaping and paving the road next year. I think we need to move it up and do it together. So we'll also have Ron Herring working to look at some funds to see where we can possibly move up some funds and move something else up so we can have that to fund.
That's on the completed list. I'm assuming that was one that's not supposed to be there.
One of my boneheaded.
Okay, I just
copy and paste. Yes,
confirm
it's
that
in the
was
wrong
case.
place. I'll get it fixed.
Everyone else asked all the questions I had, so thank you.
Thank you. Any public comments on this item?
I'm Jack Russell, 616 Island Drive. I'm just wondering, with regards to the river dredge, the worst area, the biggest problem area in the river is where the inlet canal is to the power plant, just west of the park. I think we ought to ask the Army Corps of Engineers what's causing that. And, I'm not an engineer, but I'm pretty sure it's the Florida power plant. They diverted the natural flow of the river. They've generated billions of dollars right there. They should be responsible for, maintaining the river there. They're causing the problem. I think we ought to put some pressure on them. And the kind of money we're looking for is a drop in the bucket for what they've generated there.
For sure. Thank you.
Athena Tsardoulia, 634 East Orange Street. I like what I'm hearing about the dredge project. Have we gotten any response from our senators? I know that was a discussion of Mr. LaCourse and Commissioner Banther, and I remember when we were sitting with Congressman Billarag's staff, they were to get us a contact name. Have we heard from them? Have they got us to Senator Rubio's office, or?
Not that I know of yet.
Okay.
But we'll keep it, like Bob said, he's making the calls to them
Right,
again.
right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
George Zutz, 46 West Lemon Street. When you're laying out Court Street, if you could take a look at where my office exits out onto there, the parking space, and I like what you're doing out there, but I've noticed pulling out a few times that it's kind of dangerous when the cars are coming around. that maybe there should be a little more visibility there, but.
Yeah, that's one, that, we've already noted that on the list, that's one we need to look at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comment? Do we have any other public comment? Here none. Bob, thank you very much. Thank you.
Bob?
We are now going to the consent agenda. Number 3 is the minutes for September 5th, regular session. B is September 6th, special session. C is September 19th, regular session. D is September 19th, special session. E is October 3rd, regular session. F, October 3rd, special session. G is October 17th, regular session. H, which has been corrected, is October 17th, special session. And I is November 7th, regular session. J is November 14th, regular session. Item number 4 is satisfaction release of liens. Number 5 is attorney fees, invoice 1190 and 1892. Item number 6 is special events. A is the Sponge Docks Arts and Crafts Show, January 13th through the 15th, 2018. B is the First Friday Series, February through November 2018. That has been revised. They changed the date on April 6th has changed to April 13. Also, the time for setup has changed from 3:30 to 4 p.m. C is movies at Craig Park, January 26, February 23rd, and March 16, 2018. Number 7 is increase file number 17-0007-NRS, single source purchase of water control chemicals. And number 8 is increase file 14008-C-JJ, mobile communication services. Are there any items that you'd like to pull?
I'd like to pull a 6B.
6B, okay. Any other item?
Same one.
It's just a comment I should clarify.
You want to comment? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just a quick comment. I want to thank first the merchants for doing this series. It's proved very, very successful. I remember when we first approved it two years ago, I was very skeptical. I said, there's no way it's going to work out. And it's been wildly popular. And I appreciate you all moving forward or back the setup time to 4 p.m. That was at my request. I think that's a very good thing to do to help with traffic and with local merchants. So I appreciate you doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've got questions on the same one, Mayor. I suppose I could ask we should probably pull it and then we could have a
You want to
discussion.
pull it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, are there any comments on those items? On the consent agenda with the exception of 6B? Are there any public comments on this item? I need a motion
Motion approved.
Second.
and roll call.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor LaHousas?
Yes. And we are now going to the special event 6B, First Friday Series, February through November 2018.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, I love this event. It brings so many people out from the town to downtown and for people in the downtown as well. So I completely support the event. Want to look at maybe some areas we can improve it, and we can have a discussion about it. I believe, City Manager, we've got some signage that we're going to be talking about next meeting, and I think this is an opportunity that someone from the public mentioned during the detours. When I come into town, there's not really great signage. Let's see, how to get around Tarpon Avenue or how do they get to the Sponge Docks. I think that was a pretty good point. So, I mean, if we have some type of slots where a sign can maybe set in when arts and craft shows are happening in downtown, also First Fridays, to kind of move traffic along instead of deterring people just backing in the neighborhood to try to figure the ways around. I think it would be a pretty wise decision to do.
And we're going to talk about that next month, because next month, hopefully the first meeting of January, we're going to talk about all the events for the year. And in that, we're going to talk about all the concerns, not just this one, but all the events that will downtown, the docks, and some change, including, additional signage like it was talked about and stuff. So we will also be talking about this again when we bring the year agenda of events and talk about the amount of events, how we can improve them and stuff. So I think that's going to be the first meeting in January.
Yeah, because it could be a hole in the ground where you have a cap on it, and then you drop a sign in at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock whenever they start taking it down. You take it out the next morning, and then you don't have to have the sign there permanently also. So I think that's a great idea to discuss, and thank you for bringing it up at the first of the year. The second one is talking about parking for vendors. I'm not really sure how it's set up today, or if we could ask maybe the applicant where the vendors actually park, because if the vendors park all relatively close to the parking, it leaves lack of parking for the people that are coming up to the event, or maybe parking for people that are trying to get to the businesses that are in brick and mortar buildings. So that's an area that I think we should look at. Maybe put in a stipulation, say there's a designated vendor parking. It's there already? Okay, then I missed it. So can someone clarify that for me? Can I ask the applicant to clarify that for me, or how would we go about doing that?
You can ask the applicant.
Okay.
For this one, again, that's another thing we're going to be talking about events, all the events, and some of them are limited because some of the places that'll let some be the off-site won't be. And as you know, we got a lot of limited space. I'm not sure where they use or where they do for the first Friday one. I'm thinking some other ones. So if somebody wants to come up and say what you do.
Let us know where the vendors park.
And again, we're going to be between now and the meeting in January. We want to be. That's one of the things I've got with the special event committee and stuff, to start looking at where we have some other options for all the different kind of events, from the smaller events to the larger events where we might not have any offsite because they'll take up a whole lot of where the people. We want to look at all that before we bring that back to you in January, from the smaller to the other one. So again, you're going to see that again in another month.
Hi, I'm Carol Rodriguez. I'm the event coordinator for Tarpon Springs Merchants Association. I live at 512 West Winds Drive in Palm Harbor. As far as the sign, to address you, I've talked to the different merchants on the sponge docks, and I said we would purchase signs that we would put out for First Fridays or other events, showing that you can take a ring, then turn left onto Orange, and then right to go to the
Maybe
sponge
just address
docks.
the off-site parking, because
Okay,
we've
and
got to
the-
be involved in
all
the
right.
sign thing, and we're not quite there talking with you yet on that.
Okay.
So
And the
that'll be
par-
January.
And the parking, I'm going to, between Wells Fargo and the Court Street parking lot, there is a parking lot that belongs to a lawyer. So I was going to reach out to him to see if we could rent his parking lot on First Fridays and either assign designated parking there for certain businesses, that this way they can have their clients and they can go there and park, and the merchants would pick that up. As far as the vendors, we tell them to park else far away. We do have a shuttle that we run from the Splash Dog Park, so our customers that come to the events know this, the vendors know this. So exactly having a certain parking lot for them, we kind of don't.
Well, I mean, you just answered it. The splash park would be the parking lot, and that would be also, just to make note, it would be good to have on a sign somewhere for additional parking at the splash park with a shuttle.
It is on our banner sign that we put up. It is on our 4x9 cards. It is on all of our advertisements that we do for First Friday and other events that are downtown and on the docks. We use that parking lot a lot.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anybody else?
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments, questions, Vice Mayor Prince?
Yes, thank you. Again, I want to thank the merchants covering the 4 p.m. setup time. I think, what was it, 3 p.m. last year? And then they...
And then we were going 3:30 this time, and then we asked to move it from 3:30
I
to
think 4
4.
p.m. is a good compromise. I thank them for that and for their quick response to the city manager on that. And as we go into January, when we're going to discuss these things on the macro level, not just First Friday, but all the events we have down there, we need to understand that closing Tarpon Avenue, closing the Sponge Dock is a privilege, and it's not a right. We don't run a rental hall. So we need to make sure we are considering everybody involved when we're making a master plan for these events. And this is a good problem to have, that we have lots of events now in Tarpon Springs. So I think we're not back a few years ago when we didn't own Tarpon Avenue. We couldn't shut it down the way we do now. Now that it's become so popular and so utilized, I really think we need to have that master plan in January where we set guidelines so the events are successful, traffic is impeded as least as possible, and local merchants are respected as much as possible because they're there year round. And that pertains both to the Tarpon Avenue and the Sponge Docks. So I think this is a good first step in what we're doing.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I
Go ahead.
speak on this for just a minute? I just want to say, I mean, in the last few years that this group has come together and put these First Fridays on and all these events that we're having, do you know how many people that they bring to town? A lot of people to our community. So if we shut our street down once a month for events, I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I can see 4 o'clock is a good start time to shut the street down, but just the snow place alone, what is that bringing us? 25,000 people? I mean, it's amazing. And these people work really hard at it. So before we start putting a lot of restrictions and whatnot on these events, I think we really need to think hard before we do that. Yeah, I know our merchants are here year round, but most of them wouldn't survive if we didn't have a lot of these events, because these events, I'm telling you, are bringing a lot of people to this community. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Yeah. And I also like to congratulate the Merchants Association. They're doing a great job. First Friday, it's a great event. Everybody's talking about it in Tampa Bay. They're bringing people from everywhere to Tarpon Spring. I think it's great. Yes, sometimes it's a little bit of inconvenience, but I think the outcome is great. It brings a lot of people. Mr. Salivares, who spoke earlier, he was interested about the Night of the Islands, and just wonder if the Merchants Association are thinking about taking that responsibility.
That's an issue for January, Mayor.
That's an issue, Daniel.
That's
Okay.
not an issue for tonight.
Well, at least thinking about it from now anyway. So anyway, you have a question? Yeah.
I just wanted to add to what Susan was saying. A few years ago, we had maybe 4 or 5 events in town, and other than First Fridays, most of our events are in off-season. That's when businesses are doing no business in town. So if we didn't have these events that bring in people and also let our locals go out, and it's a community building events too, all these events, it helps draw people not only to Tarpon Springs, but helps our own local residents enjoy Tarpon more, not have to go to Dunedin or Oldsmar or Tampa for an event. Keeps them in town and they shop locally. So I appreciate all these events, and these are put on by people who are also business owners and volunteer their time. So it's a big job. As far as the signage, I've been asked this over the years from the merchants on the docks that we need, where the detours are, some kind of signage, letting people know how to get to the docks. So I think it's important that we, follow up with that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I need a motion to
Motion to approve 6B.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor Alahouzes?
Yes, thank you. We are now going to the item number 9, which is the ordinance 2017-32, idle speed, no wake. This is a second reading. City Attorney will read the ordinance.
Ordinance 2017-32, an ordinance of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, amending Chapter 5, Boats, Docks, and Waterways, Article 1 in general by adding a new section entitled Section 5-7.1, Establishment of Special Slow-Speed Minimum Wake Zones and Special Idle Speed No Wake Zones on the Anclote River, providing for repeal of ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, providing for inclusion in the Code of Ordinances of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, and providing for the effective date of this ordinance. Second reading of Ordinance 2017-32 by title only. It was published in the Tampa Bay Times by title only on November 24, 2017.
Thank you. Staff report, Major Young.
Good evening. I have nothing new to update with on there, just
Okay.
waiting for your approval of this and moving forward with the state approval.
Yeah.
And then we would get the pilings installed and buoys and signage as necessary to help enforce those.
And again,
regulations.
congratulations, great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any commission comments? Are there any public comments?
I understand that the,
State your
oh,
name
I'm
again.
sorry, George Zoots, 46 West Lemon Street, Tarpon Springs. The city is enforcing and patrolling the no-wake zone on the Anclote River.
The city?
Florida Marine Patrol mostly does that for us.
Right. I'm a little confused. I've lived on the river for about 30 years. The no-wake zone is somewhat monitored within the channel, but I think most boaters think that if they're outside the markers that they don't have to abide by the speed limit. Do you know what the law is on that?
Well, when we did a lot of those no-wake zone projects back probably about 10 years ago, it's kind of broken up because down by the docks you have idle speed, no wake, and then it opens up in the middle of the channel, and I think up by the boat docks in Pasco it goes back to idle speed, no wake. So we rely heavily on Florida Marine Patrol to do our enforcement on the Anclote River. So everything should be clearly posted along that river as to whether or not you're in a, idle speed, no wake zone, or whether or not you can,
No,
plane.
I'm in a no-wake zone from the channel, but people go outside the marks.
About the Spoil Island areas? Or are you just talking about outside the channel?
Just outside. I live across from Port Tarpon, in between there and Martin's house.
Okay.
And people will go outside the channel and think it's a loophole that they can speed. It's dangerous. I mean, if the purpose of no wake is for safety and protecting the manatees has been kind of the drive on, the manatees actually swim outside the channel too. So I'm just wondering who's going to enforce, or how do we get them to enforce?
We'll contact.
It's a safety feature.
I'll have Major Young contact Major Navarro, Florida Marine Patrol, and we'll pass all that information on to them.
Yeah, I mean, when I've seen the maps before, and they cover to the coastline and the no-wake zones.
Yes.
But people don't abide by them, and they clearly, and I've seen patrols out there, and they don't even go after them for that. But if you're in the middle of the channel, you're having.
Well, I mean, it's all clearly marked out there, so the boaters should know what areas they're in. So it really becomes an enforcement issue. And I know the Marine Patrol is out there for us. So
if somebody was going fast outside the channel in a no-wake zone, they're in violation.
Yes.
That's not happening.
It depends where they are. I mean, we're in general terms.
Again, it'll all depend on what's in the ordinance, where that outline is. I know if you're talking to Spoiler Island areas, I can't remember if it's marker 27. That's outside the purview of this ordinance, by the way. This is a different area. But to answer you in general, yes, so long as it's defined in the ordinance. If it only says the main channel, then it would not be. Like when I wrote this one, I wrote shoreline to shoreline. So it would cover the entire area, whether it's inside of Spoiler Island or not. So to answer your question, it would depend, but most of those areas, I believe it's marker 27, or in that area right around there, inside the Spoiler Island area to the west of it, is encompassed in that. But there are signs out there that show that. There are another portion up around a little further out in St. Joseph Bay that is not, where people can go on plane or higher speeds.
And that's
But
broken
then,
up.
if you want to do me a favor,
Specifically at the end of Bayshore Drive, if you know where I'm talking about. And
that's already marked, yes, with signs and everything.
It's not being.
I'll get with Captain Navarro with the FWC. Thank you.
I've also seen the Coast Guard out there as well. I know they do for
I think it's
both
the Coast Guard
safety.
Auxiliary
Yeah,
is
it's the
probably out
auxiliary,
there.
but it's
Yes.
for safety, but they do
They
stop
do
people.
boating safety guidelines courses. I think they used to do the course right there at
Right.
Turtle Cove Marina.
Right. But I know what my concern is where Mr. Zoots lives, and then there's the Spoil Island, and then there's the channel. So I'm out there quite a bit, and I do see the people going between the Spoil Islands there through there, and there's
Again, those are all enforcement issues. That's not in part of this ordinance here. That's enforcement, and I can get with FWC and also any other area law enforcement that we can partner up with.
And just remember the last time we did that, they would not allow
Right. Not that I want to see
going to
that in
certain
no.
areas. They just wouldn't
Yeah.
allow it.
I
We
don't want
tried.
to specifically see that in no wake zone, but I've seen
Right.
I've heard a lot of complaints from some of the, because it's ruining the shoreline and.
Well, most of it comes down to enforcement issues in those areas, because I believe in the area that you're talking about, it already is posted, so we can get more enforcement out there for you.
Well, thank you for the information, but let's stick to the subject, please.
Yeah.
Thank
Please give me a little slack here because I've never been to a public hearing like that. My accent is in the way. I'm born in Greece, so if you don't understand me, please ask me. I will repeat myself. I've been in the water as a boater since 1980. That's 38 years almost, 37, 38. And I lived in 3 continents. I've been sailing in Greece, all over the islands, in Boston area for 32 years. And honestly, I have never seen, without blaming anybody, such a lack of respect in the water for boaters. I mean, people in the little islands around, blasting their music, going like crazy, don't respecting anybody. And having a boat in one of the marinas on the Anklet River, you see there's no wake zone signs, maybe a little farther that they should be. People don't even bother. They just go through them, speeding the same way, not slowing down. And I haven't seen any, and I don't mean, again, here to blame anybody. I don't see a police, like on a highway where we all drive, if there's a state trooper in somewhere between the lanes, you always slow down because you don't want to get a ticket. Down here, I don't see anybody. If a car, a patrol boat was somewhere docked in one place with a pole, I know there are tides, the water goes in and out, the wind, they probably cannot throw an anchor and then try to catch somebody. But if there's a patrol car that can be docked in a pole, tied to a pole, people visibly see him, and they know the next time they're going to mess, maybe he will be there and give him a ticket. There are many other ways, suggestions I have. I've been with the Coast Guard for 10 years, the auxiliary, patrolling the waters in Boston. And honestly, people are more fearful and respectful than they are here. Maybe some suggestions, I don't know who to make the suggestions. Today, I even went to the harbor master. He didn't know there was a meeting, and that was in the agenda today here. I spent another morning, the whole morning of Saturday, driving around to find out those boat people that rent those boats out to people to go and get crabs and lobster. And talking to them, it was like talking to mafia because they wouldn't even badge and understand what respect means. I brought up, you know, something the city, we're going to bring up that they might fine you. Not only the boat owner, you know, the captain who's riding the boat, but you as a, like you rent the boat to them. Immediately, a few days after, I did see some slowing down. They were not going like crazy, especially the people they rent those boats for crabs. So if anyone would like to talk with me, not that I'm an expert, but I would love to participate. I'd love to suggest ideas more. All the boats have numbers on them so that you can identify them instead of being the way they are. The harbor master in Salem, Massachusetts, was telling us at the Coast Guard, people buy boats and they ask, why do I need the ropes? I mean, unbelievable how many we have around. But it's the boating lobby that's pushing freedom. Let's sell boats and make money. They don't care about safety. So that's kind of my thought. And if anywhere I can talk to, whatever I can suggest or help.
Sir, this is not what the subject is all about. We're talking about,
No, thank you.
Okay, that's good.
this is not about these, we're talking about something else right now. Okay, that's fine. But the Marine Patrol are responsible for patrolling the area. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Are there any other comments, please?
Douglas Natosi, 1102 Flying Fish, Tarpon Springs. No additional testimony on behalf of myself and of the Anklet Point Homeowners Association. I think we pretty much said our piece last week. The one thing we have had happen is, since this came after the last hearing, it was in the paper, the amount of support that have come out from people in the community on this has been fairly large, and we're glad to see that. And the other part that is interesting about this and the dialogue that has been developed because of what the city, the police department, FWC has done is attention to the river and the vital part that we have right here for economic growth and recreation within the city. These are all very fixable issues by getting FWC involved. They were recently at our house, spent some time with us talking, and they were in support of this. The one thing they need residents' input. They need the police department's involvement, which they have. And once they have these things identified, they're here to work with us. Last year, Memorial Day, at a request, FWC ran aerial patrols with patrol boats on the river, and they're more than happy to assist in the enforcement and the education. But we're available. Any other comments or support that you need from us, we are here. We're more than glad to work with the police department, assisting them for access to the river. And again, we thank the council for being proactive on this measure and appreciate the support. And anything we can do to help you, please let us know.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well, thank you. Need a motion?
Motion to approve.
Roll call, please.
Can we have discussion, I guess, also?
You have something?
Yeah,
Hold on, sorry.
I just find it interesting that we've had multiple public comments that talk about speed in other parts of the river. So if we could just put a reminder to follow up with the Marine Patrol more often to combat these situations.
I am in contact with Major Navarro or Captain Navarro with FWC constantly, and we work in partnership with them quite well, so I'll keep them up to date,
I'm sure
and we'll
you
get them out there more patrolling out there.
Complaints about speeds on roads too.
It's
so I know
you know, it's all over on the river, just not even at that areas, but even out in outside the area.
And Mayor, you cut the individual off when he came up for public comment, and you cut him off again for the comment when you told him to speak at this time. So I just want to say I appreciate your public comment. I know he may have left already for the night, but he was cut off twice. So I just want to let him know that he's welcome to come back anytime. And
I gave that gentleman my business card and told him to give me a call tomorrow also.
Okay, all right. So thank you for your help with everything with the police department and involving everybody. Thanks.
Commissioner Carr, thanks for your observation, but I didn't cut him. It was off the subject. And thank you very much.
But he was cut off in public comment and told to speak at this time too. So I'm just letting him know that he's welcome to come back. And
he is welcome. Thanks for your comment. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta? Yes. Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor Alahouzes?
Yes, thank you. And we are now going to the item number 10. The ordinance 2017-34, adoption of Florida Building Code. This is the first reading. City Attorney, please read the ordinance.
Ordinance 2017-34, an ordinance of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, amending Chapter 6 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Tarpon Springs by amending Section 6-1 to adopt the 2017 Florida Building Code Building, the 2017 Florida Building Code Residential, the 2017 Florida Building Code Existing Building, the 2017 Florida Building Code Energy Conservation, the 2017 Florida Building Code Accessibility, the 2017 Florida Building Code Plumbing, 2017 Florida Building Code Mechanical, 2017 Florida Building Code Fuel Gas, the 2017 Florida Building Code 6th Edition Test Protocols for High-Velocity Hurricane Zones, the National Electrical Code NFPA 70 2014 edition by amending the 2017 Florida Building Code Chapter 1 Administration, providing for modifications that may arise at public hearing, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. First reading of ordinance 2017-34 by title only. Second reading to be held on December 12, 2017. It was published in the Tampa Bay Times by title only on November 24, 2017.
Our Building Director, Anthony Mastraccio, make the presentation.
Commissioners, Vice Mayor, Mayor, Anthony Mastraccio, Building Development Director. The Florida Building Code is mandated by Florida statute to update every 3 years. Therefore, I bring before you today the ordinance for adoption of this 2017 Florida Building Code 6th edition. I attended several meetings with local building officials, and we did not encounter any major changes in the code. However, we did come across an extensive amount of technical changes, and the reasoning for this is now that this 2017 Florida Building Code will be our base building code for future editions. It will then lose the designation of year, and it'll be noted as 7th edition, 8th edition, and so on. Currently, we use the International Code as our base code edition, but after this code is adopted, it will take precedence. And with this said, I'm here for any questions.
Commissioner Carr, you have any questions? Is there any public comment on this item? Am I correct in asking for a motion? Motion, please.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Great job, Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
We're on number 11.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to item number 11, which is Resolution 2017-41, Application 1791, Lemon Street Center Site Plan, and this is a quasi-judicial. The city attorney will read the title, will explain the process.
Mr. Mayor, items 11 and 12 are quasi-judicial this evening, so Resolution 2017-41 at Lemon Street and Resolution 2017-43 at Martin Luther King Drive. These are quasi-judicial proceedings where the commission acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At such a hearing, it is not the commission's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In such a hearing, the commission is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings to previously established criteria contained in the city's code in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The commission may only consider evidence that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If that evidence demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria, then the commission is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established by the code, then the commission is required by law to find against the applicant. All witnesses must give their testimony under oath. All persons testifying must give their name and address for the record. All testimony and questioning must address matters that are relevant and material to the issues under consideration. City staff will present its testimony and evidence. The applicant will have an opportunity to cross-examine city staff. The applicant will present its own testimony and witnesses. City staff will have an opportunity to cross-examine the applicant's witnesses. Members of the public opposing the application will be given an opportunity to present testimony after all members of the public speaking in opposition have concluded. Members of the public wishing to speak in support of the application will have the opportunity to do so. Each member of the public is limited to 4 minutes. The applicant will then have an opportunity to make a closing argument or summary, after which city staff will be given an opportunity to make closing argument or summary. Following this, the commission will consider the matter. Commissioners may ask questions of witnesses. A motion will be made and a vote will be taken. At this point, I would ask the Board of Commissioners if they've had any ex parte communications on either item 11 or 12.
None.
Seeing none, I would ask that if there are witnesses to give testimony tonight on either one of those applications, I'm going to ask you to stand, raise your right hand, and be sworn at this time. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, turning first to item 11, Resolution 2017-41, a resolution of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, approving application 17-91 for site plan approval for Lemon Center to construct an 8,000 square foot light industrial building located 97 feet west of the northwest corner of the intersection of East Lemon Street and South Levis Avenue, providing for findings, providing for a certificate of concurrency, providing for conditions, and providing an effective date. Resolution 2017-41 by title only.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Heather Erler, your Planning and Zoning Director, and staff for this application. Again, this application is for Lemon Street Center, which is for a light industrial building, approximately 8,000 square feet. This is located approximately 97 feet west of the northwest corner of Lemon Street and South Levis Avenue on approximately 4.1 acres, and it's located in your special area plan. Essentially, the applicant has worked through a lot of the site planning issues as well as attended HPB to get approval for a light industrial building at this point. He's calling it a trade building. The types of uses that he's proposing in that particular building would include things like artist studios, print manufacturing, that type of thing. He doesn't currently have existing leases, but he's looking for those types of uses, which is consistent with what that corridor was planned for. That corridor was an underutilized industrial corridor, which at the time when you adopted your special area plan, you intended for that corridor to allow for light industrial uses. So this is consistent with that proposed plan. And with that, this proposed building is consistent with the site planning conditions under which the special area plan provisions require. That being the case, there's limited issues with they're doing a very interesting pervious parking lot, which will allow for stormwater management. It's very similar to some of the other parking lots that we're seeing in other areas of the city where people really don't want to have that big open stormwater pond. And so as a result, they're using an alternative surface to try to manage their stormwater impact. So there's going to be limited paved parking surfaces and limited paved surfaces on this property. With that, the applicant is not requesting any change to the land use or the zoning district. They are consistent with the criteria for the special area plan. They have met the criteria and provisions of the Heritage Preservation Ordinance, and they have seek their approval from the Heritage Preservation Board and were approved. And with that, they have also seeking a concurrency certificate, and we can serve all of their potable water needs, their sanitary sewer needs, and they are consistent with that. Staff is recommending approval of the application with the following conditions. Developer is responsible for acquiring all other jurisdictional permits, approvals, and for meeting the minimum criteria of the Land Development Code, including compliance with the public art program. The applicant must mitigate for tree removal at the time of permitting pursuant to LDC section 1.33.06. Any lighting to be installed on site shall be shielded and directed internal to the site. Construction plans shall be consistent with the approved site plan, and the payment of all requisite fees attendant to the project shall be paid in accordance with the Land Development Code. The site plan shall be expired within 1 year of the effective date unless an application has been filed for a building permit with construction plans signed and sealed by a registered engineer licensed in the state of Florida. And this application was heard before the Planning and Zoning Board on November 20th. After limited discussion, they recommended approval. And I can answer any questions that you may have.
I've got a couple questions. I noticed there wasn't any shrubs along the east side. Maybe I missed it. Parking lot. Maybe I missed that one. I know typically the parking lot requires some type of, I think it's 36 inches.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. Let me get to the site plan.
Yeah, it's CL 1.1. Like third from the back.
Okay, the reason why this one doesn't require parking lot is it's parking lot to parking lot. There's an adjacent parking lot for the church, I believe, that's adjacent to this. So you generally don't require, when you have parking adjacent to parking, it's not like going onto a street. When the parking buffers are required is when your parking lot is going into a street. There's actually land between where this is not right on the street. There's like 97 feet of actual property between this and Levis. It looks like it's right on the street, but it's not.
Okay.
So parking buffers only required when you're actually going to be parking into, like, lights are going to be going into the street.
What about like if it's because I think there's a building on the northeast side where the cars would be going straight into the building of like
Again, it's adjacent, the adjacent uses are consistent. They're the same type of non-commercial uses, so the uses don't require buffering between the uses. It would only be if you had a street adjacent.
Okay.
In this particular case. Now, there are other situations where a buffer would be required.
Okay, thank you. And then the other two questions. I know it's a vinyl fence. Is there a historic district? I mean, I don't remember what the
There's
type
not.
of fences are.
They're not precluded from having a vinyl fence in the historic district. They may be allowed a vinyl fence, and it was part of their approval. Again, this is non-contributing because of the fact that there's nothing on it's vacant. So as a result, there are things that are allowed by staff review. That is one of those things that is allowed by staff review.
Okay. I was looking at the dumpster in the alley. This might be the applicant question. I noticed a neighboring business didn't have a fence around the dumpster, but that's a requirement, isn't it?
It's not a requirement. They are permitted to use landscaping in lieu of actual dumpster enclosure. And that's what they've chosen to do here, is to landscape around. I think that's what they've done.
There's just
here.
grass around this one, I think.
Hold on. Then that is something that we can put as a condition, that they will either have to enhance the landscaping around the dumpster, or they'll have to enclose it, because we did that at Morgan Street. You allowed them to move the dumpster back and then did the enhanced landscaping around the dumpster versus having the enclosure right on Morgan Street, because that's where the dumpster would have been.
Is there a discussion at all, and maybe the applicant knows more, Mr. Zutz, but the alley's pretty tight, and I know there's another dumpster from a neighboring business. Is there anything that's evaluated to see if the garbage truck could go all the way down the alley or not?
The Public Works Director evaluates all of these individually through the TRC process, and he had no concerns with the dumpster being at that location. As a matter of fact, we had it at a different location, and we relocated it from that location to this location because of the truck being able to get to it.
That's all the questions I have for you, so thank you.
Any additional questions for staff?
Yes, Heather, I got a couple questions to ask you. This project is located with the historic district, and the applicant has received the certificate of approval. Was there any conditions involved?
No. The only condition that they have is that it has to be consistent with the application that they submitted. So basically, when he comes in with his final application, site plans and all of that that you're basically seeing tonight have to be consistent when they go through the permitting process.
I think it's a great project, and I'm sure Mr. Zeus doesn't know how many jobs it's going to generate yet, have you? Do you?
George Zutz, 46 West Lemon Street, Tarpon Springs. I do have other buildings that I've had experience with. In fact, I just signed a lease with a photographer. I mean, in the perfect world, I'd like to see and be part of seeing the revitalization of that area in Tarpon Springs, and that's one of the main reasons I'm doing it. I mean, distributors have shown interest in that, where they'll have products, whether it's one kind of widget or another, but it'd be clean industry. And what I'm marketing so far, pre-marketing, if this is approved, is that we would have pedestrians being able to walk down to the trail where there's restaurants, and Silver King, I think it's called, is close by. And the success of a lot of downtown areas is people being there, and this will probably add a little bit to it. Number of jobs, I couldn't tell you.
All right, thank you.
That's it. Any additional questions for staff? At this time, I'd like to ask the applicant if he wishes to make any additional presentation to the board. You're not required to. Okay. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Any members of the public wishing to speak in support? Does either party wish to make a closing statement?
I had questions for the applicant. I'm not sure if I'm...
I'd invite the applicant down to the podium.
Mr. Zutz, thanks. Just wanted to touch base on a couple items on the landscape plan. there's a design to put in a southern magnolia on the southeast corner of the property. I know it's one of the trees that's approved on our list, but I would make a recommendation that is replaced along with the 2 crepe myrtles that are recommended in the front of the, or designed in the front of the property as well. For the southern magnolia, you've got a live oak tree right next to the parking space. And then you have another oak tree right out on the road. And in design purposes, that's going to create a canopy issue with the southern magnolia. Those grow about 60 feet tall. And for how close the other 2 oak trees are, it's going to create a canopy issue probably in the next couple years for you, and it's going to be a headache. So I would like to recommend that you replace that maybe with a weeping yaupon. It's a type of holly tree. It's durable. It doesn't freeze. It's evergreen. It's artistical. It's got a weepingness to it. Or there's some other alternative trees that are also available. I know the ornamental olive tree is a pretty popular tree along Lemon Street. And I would also make the same recommendation for the crepe myrtle trees that are in the front of the building. On the B1 and landscape plan also to keeping your design consistent, it would be the same look all the way across the front with an evergreen tree. Occasionally they'll get red berries on them. And I think it's just going to serve your property better overall. I'm not sure if that's something you'd be interested in or...
I'll take a look at it. I think that my engineer just kind of filled in some stuff. He didn't even run that by me, but I will probably consult with my landscape architect that knows our communities for us and talk to him about it. But I'm open to a discussion on that.
And then going to the dumpster situation, also looking at some either, I don't know, I have to refer to Heather, I think, on this one again, but some type of plant, if it's a shrub or a fence of some sort, I think city staff and you can come to an agreement on that one, on what needs to be done for that.
What is on the alleyway now? It sounds like you've been down there lately.
I was just looking at the picture.
I mean, there's other dumpsters around there.
There's other dumpsters that are out there. There's nothing around those dumpsters right now. So, and I mean, I think you and I both understand that existing properties aren't required to be necessarily by new building codes, but that's just part of the building, right? So I don't have any other further questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Anybody else? All right, Mr. Mayor, you may seek a motion at this point.
Okay. The chair will entertain a motion.
Motion approved.
Second.
Any other commission comments? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther? Mayor LaHousas?
Yes, thank you. Congratulations, George. Item number 12 is the resolution 2017-43, the application 1595 for the 25 Martin Luther King Jr. This is a site plan and is also quasi-judicial property.
Resolution 2017-43, a resolution of the City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, approving application number 15-95 for site plan approval for development of a 6,400 square foot office and storage building for a lawn care business located on the south side of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, approximately 150 feet west of the intersection of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive and South Pinellas Avenue, providing for findings, providing for a certificate of concurrency, providing for conditions, and providing an effective dates. Resolution 2017-43 by title only. At this time, I would turn it over to Ms. Erwiller.
Thank you. Again, Mayor, Commissioners, Heather Erwiller, Planning and Zoning Director, and staff to this application. This is an application a long time coming. This was a problem property that we've been waiting to bring forward to you to have them finally construct the building on the property. It's for a lawn care company, and they're actually going to have two storefronts. So when you look at the elevation, you can see that the building actually will front on MLK, and will actually have two storefronts. Now, because of the elevation of this building, they'll actually have to go up onto the second floor to enter the office space. Underneath will be storage space because of the elevation of the building based on the flood code. That it just is what it is based on the flood elevation of that property. It's a lower property. the other buildings around it are different because they were developed pre-firm before the flood maps. So as a result, that's the different characteristic when you look at the floor plans of this particular building. With that, they're basically looking to access this off of the alleyway and front the building on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, which is a good thing that is consistent with the character district. This is in the South Pinellas character district within the special area plan. This is subject to the Transect-based code. That district extends from Boyer to Morgan Street. It's characterized by a retail corridor with a mixed ground floor retail uses, residential and off uses on second floor or other stories. The building in this particular case is consists of 2 stories with second floor office space and storage below. They're proposing 5 spaces, only one of which will be paved. Again, this is another alternative surface. They're looking to use a gravel surface here. This one will have some stormwater, again, because it's in the flood zone. They need to do some, and the size of the building, they need to do some storage of water on that facility. So that's the reason why they can't get away with, like, on the 8,000 square foot building, they don't have a pond. In this case, because of the size of the building and this particular lot being a little bit lower, they got to have some stormwater capacity. So that's why you're seeing a pond here versus thing. There's an existing stormwater management permit already issued on this property. The applicant will be removing 15 trees. At the time of permitting, they're going to be required to get their permit, and they are going to be mitigating on site. You can see that they're going to be providing 8 additional trees. However, their list on their planning schedule only shows 7, so they'll have to. There's a condition on your backup that says that they're going to have to provide 1 additional tree. They've got ample space on the property to locate that additional tree. The project did not trigger the threshold to warrant a traffic study, but all other concurrency standards have been met, including the drainage report, which is required for the environmental resource permit by the Southwest Florida Water Management District. There's no requirement for a land use change or a zoning change. It's consistent with all of the provisions of the special area plan. And with that, staff is recommending approval of the application with several conditions. I'm going to read those conditions into the record. The developer is responsible for acquiring all other jurisdictional permits or approvals and for meeting the minimum criteria for the Land Development Code, including compliance with the public art program. The applicant must mitigate for all tree removal at the time of permitting pursuant to LDC section 133.06. Water and sewer infrastructure shall be privately owned and maintained. Construction shall be consistent with the approved site plan. The payment of all requisite fees attendant to the project shall be paid in accordance with the Land Development Code. The site plan shall expire within 1 year of the effective date unless the applicant has filed for a building permit with construction plans signed and sealed by a registered engineer licensed in the state of Florida. Any site lighting shall be shielded and directed internal to the project. There shall be no outdoor storage of material or equipment on site. The alleyway shall be evaluated with the Public Works Department and if required shall be paved to city standards. 1 additional tree needs to be added to the landscape plan as shown in the plant list and requirements, and any fencing shall be kept in good condition. And the Planning and Zoning Board heard this application on November 20th, and after some limited discussion really about the fencing, because what's on there now is chain link fence with the opaque screening that's been all ripped up. He's now going to be removing that. So as a result of him removing that, we changed the condition at hearing. That's why you're seeing a modified condition that any fencing that he does put on there, because he wants to not have the opaque fencing, which I'm fine with as long as there's no outdoor storage, which is why you have a condition for no outdoor storage here, is any fencing that he does have has to be kept in good condition. I need some kind of condition here to control for that, because what's been out there now has not been kept in good condition. So with that, I can answer any questions that you may have.
I have a question. I'm very glad that we're going to develop this property.
Me too.
We've been trying for a long time. The question that I have is, the property will have an access from the LOA. That alley, the alley is it's in bad shape. Are they going to do any repairs to that?
Right now, I'm going to have Public Works go out as part of their evaluation when the permit actually comes in. If they deem that it needs to be paved as part of their construction, just like any other roadway, they will have to pave that up to the location of at least their driveway opening to make it safe for you to enter and exit their location, because that's their main exit. But they're gonna have to, this Public Works Department's gonna have to evaluate that. That's outside my purview to make that call. I don't have a roadway degree. So we'll have them evaluate that. If they think it's unsafe, then we will have them pave it as part of the construction process.
Good, thank you. Any question?
The only question I have is, would it be possible, you brought up fencing and we addressed this with the property behind it, when they want to do chain link, and we asked they do aluminum. Is it reasonable to ask for this property as well to do aluminum fencing?
Well, that was a gate to close off a thing. This is around the entire property behind the building. So that means it's going to run from the front, tie into the building and run the entire length of the property. It's gonna be a somewhat more expensive proposition than just a gate along Morgan Street to cut off the access from Morgan Street. So you're talking about a very different expense to an applicant, and you are outside the historic district, and you do not currently have any regulations in your land development code that specify types of fencing, nor do you have any regulations in your special area plan that specify the type of fencing. So you're gonna be very limited in making that argument. You also don't have the applicant here tonight.
Okay, we I put that on my property on Tarpon Avenue. I understand the expense. It looks a lot better. If it's just behind the property, I'm fine with chain link. If it was gonna be around the front or more visible, then I would request to have aluminum. But
yeah, he's changed a little bit about what he wants to do because he wants to keep that nice frontage. He's gonna tie it in because the gate is gonna go along the side. Now, it's gonna be on the alleyway side because his entrance, again, is on the alleyway, but it's gonna be back behind the building on the side. So the building face and the public sidewalks, you're not gonna have that up on the side like what you have at Santos Isles where you have it right up on the sidewalk. You're not gonna have that. He's gonna have it tied into the building. So it's gonna be
as a net win, because what's there now is chain link with torn apart, whatever that is. So if that's gonna be removed, it'll be a storefront or whatever it's gonna be. And behind it, I can live with that.
I mean, if you want to stipulate that, you can. We can mess with that condition, but just recognize we do not have the applicant here to have that conversation.
If it's not running behind, if it's not running along the street, then I'm not going to lose sleep over
Okay.
chain link fence. Thank you.
So based on the plans, it shows that the chain link fence will run from Martin Luther King down the alleyway. So to me, that's still a frontage part.
Yeah, it's still going to be on the alleyway. It's just not going to be on.
I think as a recommendation, I would like to make a recommendation that at least the alleyway have some type of fencing that's, we still have the preview as a board to say if it fits the neighborhood or not, although it's not in our code.
I'm just giving you the rule.
Yeah.
What
so
you got?
I agree. The part that fronts the neighboring property along the other side, the chain link fence seems perfectly fine, but the area that fronts the alleyway would, I think, fit the neighborhood so much better if it was an aluminum fence or match the fencing that's in the front of the building. That prevents people from falling off the ramp into the road. So I'm not sure.
So you want them to use the handicap accessibility ramp?
No, the fencing, like to tie in the fencing. If you look at the rendering here, it's got fencing in front of each one of the buildings, right?
That's the handicap accessibility ramp. That's not fencing.
Okay, so what's
That's the
here?
ramp. That's the ramp and it's the guardrail to hold for the ramp. The ramp goes all the way across on both sides.
Tie in possibly for that, or just be a black aluminum fence. I would think would be to continue the look all around the property, not the whole property, but just the area that you see from the frontage of the alley. I think that would make sense. So front and middle, though, it's not necessarily the ramp because there's no door, there's no ramp. Another thing I want to just bring attention to the board and ask Heather also is, this is a rendition. They're planting oak trees in front, not palm trees. So the rendition that was supplied, is this actually what they're planning on building here? Or is this just to say this is the building that they're going to build and it could look like anything?
That's their proposed elevation for the front. Now, the palm trees and that type of thing is different than what they're proposing on their landscaping plan.
Right. So I mean, they're still looking for like a. I mean, this fits the neighborhood. It's got the peaks of the roof. It's got some type of brick and different. It's not just one look. So it's a good looking building, I think. There's just some areas that I think we could talk to as a commission to keep the area looking better, as this is an area that's improving, and I think we have an opportunity here to make sure that it fits in with the neighborhood that's also improving. 5 spots, it seems kind of low for the 2 buildings. So what are the requirements for that? Are we doing shared parking in other areas?
It's based on the use of the building. The size of the office units are small, so as a result of the office unit, that's what the requirement is. The parking is required based on the office space.
Okay. And then I know the applicant's not here, but I would strongly encourage also, there's a viburnum odoratisum being suggested in the plans of this as a shrub around the property. That type of plant tends to get leggy, and what I mean by leggy is you have a plant that's all green typically, but then it loses its foliage in the bottom. So with that, I would recommend either a podocarpus or a viburnum suspensum, and I think that's something we should put in as a condition, because viburnum odoratisums aren't quality plants. They typically die off after 5 or 6 years, and then you lose your reason for having them there. Similar to chilies is a great example of that in 19, how we had them out front for the code, and now they're no longer there because they were ripped out. So that would be a condition that I would recommend, is swapping out the viburnum odoratisums for viburnum suspensums, or podocarpus in the 3-gallon size, up to the applicant. And I would also make a recommendation, depending on what the board decides, to have some type of additional fencing along the alleyway, but then the remainder of the fencing could be the coated chain link fence. That's all my questions.
Are there any additional questions for staff? The applicant is not here, correct? Right.
Is not present.
Are there members of the public wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Members of the public in support? Closing statement, Heather?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Well, thank you. Are there any other comments? No? I need a motion. I need a second.
Can I make some, can I amend the motion for the plants that I recommended? If the board's open, I would make a recommendation that we look at replacing the viburnum odoratisums with viburnum suspensum, or give the applicant option for podocarpus as an alternative. 2 different plants serve the same purpose. Since it wasn't brought up in the motion, I think we would give the applicant and encourage the applicant, not require the applicant, but I would like to encourage the applicant to look at fencing that could be aluminum along the alleyway, and then chain link coated fence along the back part of the property.
Isn't there a second for that? No, I don't.
You'll need a second for that, yeah.
We don't have a second.
Okay.
I'm just rescind my motion, because I can't pronounce it. Totally lost on landscaping. I can rescind my motion, he can motion. Is that allowed, Mr.
I didn't hear your question, Commissioner, I'm sorry.
I mean, so he's now amended my motion. So we need a second on the amendment? Is that how this works?
You need a second on the amendment, yes, sir.
We don't have a second.
We don't have a second at this juncture.
Still have a motion on the floor. And a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Carr?
No.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther?
Yes.
Mayor Alahouzes?
Yes, thank you.
Mayor, if I may,
Huh?
if I just real quick, Commissioner Carr has a lot of good ideas with the landscape. Like I said, that's way above my pay grade. I can't pronounce most of the stuff he's talking about. I'm sure it's good. So I think in a meeting in January and February, which are slower months for us usually, we maybe could have a discussion item on landscaping where we can set some guidelines, review some things, and Commissioner Carr can have more input then. So when we review these items, we're not making last-minute changes on landscaping. And I have no clue what these trees and plants are. And, you know, if the applicant's not here, or if they don't understand, or they don't like Mr. Suits wanted to consult his landscaping guy, then maybe in a slower meeting, we should have a discussion item on landscaping to allow Commissioner Carr to help guide us on that, okay? Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
I'd like to
I
make
agree.
them-
I agree. I think landscaping is important, and it's unfortunate that the applicant wasn't here because we couldn't discuss what his ideas are. We didn't really know exactly if that's what he's doing or not. So it's difficult to decide without being able to speak to the applicant.
Well, if we saw some visuals, maybe we could bring some visuals next time.
I don't know what these things are.
Yeah, because we don't know what you're talking about.
It's okay. Well, I mean, let me just express this to you, though. I mean, if you're approving a project and a landscape has a direct impact on the aesthetics of the building and the aesthetics of the area, and I would consider myself an expert, and if you have an expert making a recommendation, also giving the applicant options to potentially some plants that shouldn't be in our guidelines, I would recommend that you would maybe ask more questions about it. It wouldn't be additional cost to the applicant or anything along those lines. So I believe landscaping is just as important as the design of the architecture of the building, and it could have a large impact on the whole area as a whole. So I do would like to echo Commissioner Sieber and Vice Mayor Banther to looking at our codes and bringing that up at sometime in January, February as well.
Okay. We are now going to the miscellaneous, which is item number 13, authorizing the city attorney to proceed with the court enforcement board recommendation to foreclosure 1717 Mandalay. Not yet, please.
This item I'm bringing forward to you.
It's staff report, yeah. Go ahead.
This item I'm bringing forward to you. This item was going to come to you in August, but I held it up to give, well, I'm not quite sure what to call her, but a representative of the property owner or a family member. I won't go into what, but the person you'll hear speaking tonight, I gave an October, although this is a case where we've had 16 pillars for 13 years that's plagued the residents of Mandalay in that area that has sat there and under the same property owner who is now in China. And despite all the efforts and despite my judgment of we probably should go because we've been sitting all these years and probably be sitting more to go in August, I gave an opportunity for the applicant to work with the police department and code enforcement to try to come to a resolution. And they'll probably tell you, like I did, that in my 39 years and all their years, they've never worked with an applicant that's less able to be worked with on this situation. After plenty of time, it went before the code enforcement board with a foreclosure, which they went and do. And now I'm bringing it forward to you to finally resolve this for those issues. And of course, Chief Cochin and I know Tom Trask handled it from the code enforcement end, but I know some experience as a city attorney about the inability of having any hope that any more time will help in this situation, that for the sake of those residents out there that for more than 10 years been putting up with this, to authorize the city attorney's office, per the recommendation of the code enforcement board, where the applicant had an ample opportunity to present her case, to approve what they said and send this forward to foreclosure so we can own the property and we can take care of the situation.
Thank you. Mr. Licouris, this is a very unpleasant thing to do, but the purpose of the court enforcement is to improve the safety, the health and welfare for the citizens. And you're saying that that's been going on for 13 years. The owner, it was not capable of making those corrections and bringing it to compliance?
Well, again, I think you can talk to chief and code enforcement, but I have no hope that that'll be able to be done. And there's plenty of opportunity given, and maybe the chief can address all they've went through to try to go around in circles and come back to the same place.
Well, we've spent countless hours trying to work with Ms. Marsh. I mean, hours. This case has been going on for a really long time. Like the city manager said, he actually stopped it and let the code enforcement board hear it first before it came to you. I mean, she's been afforded full due process. This has been going on a really long time. She will not work with us. And, it's a blight to the neighborhood. So that's where we stand at this point.
Well, thank you. City Attorney?
Yeah, I just wanted to update the commission on some recent developments. Tom Trask in my office has handled a lot of this because he does our code enforcement and foreclosure work. I think that Ms. Marsh is going to speak here tonight, and I want to make clear a couple of things to you. First, she doesn't own the property. The property is owned by her mother. We've had some indication over our dealings with her that she has a power of attorney, but I have never seen that power of attorney, a valid power of attorney, giving her any authority to act on behalf of this property. Further, over the last 48 hours, including as late as 5:40 this afternoon, we've been contacted. When I say we, I mean myself and Tom, have been contacted by 3 separate attorneys purporting to represent Ms. Marsh. They are not associated with one another, and none of the 3 knew that the other 2 were also purporting to represent Ms. Marsh. So in terms of her representation, her ability to act on behalf of this property, we don't know which way is up at this point. At 5:40 this afternoon, as I was on the way to the meeting, I received a letter from one of those attorneys requesting that this board delay action on this foreclosure for 6 months in order that Ms. Marsh be given the opportunity to bring the property into compliance. I tell you that not because I think it's something that you should do, but only because she sent me the letter. I told her that I couldn't physically bring it to you because I was in my car on the way here when I received it. I wholeheartedly agree with the city manager that the only way this property is going to be brought into compliance is through this foreclosure action. I also wanted to bring you up to speed that late this afternoon, Ms. Marsh attempted to file a demolition permit or sought a demolition permit with the building department. That permit has not been acted upon. It is in review. I have not looked at it. I did speak to the building official before the meeting, and there are indications that we will not be able to issue it because there is no licensed contractor associated with it, and because Ms. Marsh, to our knowledge at this juncture, has no authority to act on behalf of the property. So I just wanted to bring you up to date on those events.
So in other words, we don't have an owner responsible here.
Correct.
Thank you. Wait a minute. Any comments? Yeah.
Somewhere in here, I'm reading, on this date, Ms. Marsh arrived slating that she had only the power of attorney completed and provided me with a copy of it.
Yeah, it was not valid.
Oh, it wasn't valid.
It was not.
Okay.
It was not notarized. It was not a valid power of attorney.
Okay. I was just curious about that.
Again, she has had from August to bring that to us.
And again, she's not the owner of the property.
Right.
Ma'am, you'll have your opportunity to speak in just a moment, okay? Thank you.
Can I ask for clarification? What are the fines? Are they at 30,000 plus?
Yeah, the fines are in excess of $30,000. The property is unencumbered according to a title search that we had performed, so there are no liens standing in front of ours. And we think I don't know the present value of the property, but we think it's in the $100,000 range. There's going to be some expense to the city in bringing it into compliance because there is, as we've noted, these pilings that are out there that have been there for years. So we can get it and negotiate with a new owner. Now, Ms. Marsh, or an attorney perhaps acting on behalf of the owner, please also understand she may request of you to stop doing, don't approve this tonight so that we can negotiate and she can bring in compliance. We can always do that. That can be done whether you authorize foreclosure proceedings or not. That can be done at any juncture. So that I would discourage you from considering that as part of your decision making tonight, because that can be done. Frankly, unfortunately, we have 11th hour building permits and attorneys running around at 11, 12 years looking at this property, and now there's 3 attorneys in 48 hours purporting to represent her. So I guess at the end of the day, the question is there equity in the property? Yeah, we don't generally recommend foreclosure unless there is something to be gained, and we put the city in a better financial position than it would have been otherwise, and that we get compliance.
How long does the foreclosure process take?
The foreclosure process really depends on the type of case that's litigated and how, but I would say somewhere between 6 and 18 months.
During that time, she can always bring it up to compliance.
Always bring it up to compliance, and that wouldn't necessarily, our lien would still be valid. But we can always bring it back to you folks if there is some kind of reasonable effort to do something with the property. We can always, staff can get together and bring it back to you folks to say maybe it's better if we don't follow through with foreclosure, et cetera. But
I would say it have to be major progress.
yeah, certainly it would.
Completed.
Yes.
Are there any other liens on the property?
There are none.
No liens. Okay.
Yeah, and it's non-homesteaded, so we do have the ability to foreclose it and collect it.
Any other questions? We are now going to the public comments. If you please, come forward. State your name and your address for the record, please.
Mayor, could you remind of the time limit, please?
Hmm?
You remind me of the first of the
Yeah,
time limit.
it's 4 minutes, yeah.
Better tell her, 'cause you need to tell her, Mayor, because
Could I just take the rest of those and I'll pass them down? Thanks.
Please state your name and your address for the record, and you will give given 4 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, City Manager, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioner. My name is Melody Marsh, and I want to speak about foreclosure 1717 Mandalay Drive. Please do not vote to direct foreclosure my property. I have a plan and timeline, and I want to have a chance to build this house. A lot of things happen in my life, and I want to build this house that I want to do, and that is my dream. I want to start my new life with my family in Tarpon Spring, the area me and my family always want to live. This message was in Wisconsin. My family owned this property for a long time. We pay tax and property maintenance every year on time. And I just want to have a chance for me to get this done, to build a house. Today, I submit a demolition permit, which is the plan I've been discussed with my demolition company. The demolition company, I contact more than 10 different demolition companies. After they review my situation, they direct me to talk to a structural engineer, architect, and builder. When I came to Tarpon Spring in August 10th, the city manager direct me to the Michael Troll and Steve Gasson to planting tree. At that process, I also contact the demolition company, and that's a mystery about the column. Before I came here, I don't know anything about the mystery of the column, and now everything is clear. I even have the blueprint for the whole plant, and I also have the building permit from the previous owner when they sell this plant to us. And I didn't know the column standing there is a violation until this year. I know that. I never received any communication about they send this to the Wisconsin. So now I learned about that this year. I came here, I try everything I can to comply. First, I try to put tree, what Michael Troll want me to do. I submit every plan. I have all the picture. If you have enough time, I can show you, including invoice, what landscaping people charge me, architecture charge me. Right now, after I talk to all these architect, demolition company, and they suggest me I have to build this house, cannot demo. I'm willing to demo to be compliant. But once demo, I won't able to build a house again because the column is not the mystery anymore. Underneath have pile cap and piling and already proved by the Tarpon Spring. If I cut down the piling, I won't even able to sell the property anymore or to build to be safe to live, according to the structural engineer. So
If you please finish, your time has expired.
I please give me a chance. My plan is that demolition permit I pull to date and give that the chance for my architect and structural engineer to get the update blueprint, because the blueprint I obtained, they gave me, and all this record from the city of Tarpon Spring was expired by the previous owner. And no city in America will allow me to have piling violation for that long. And I didn't know that. First thing, I'm apologize. All the people sitting here, because I didn't know piling is, the column is the violation until this year. So I'm apologize for that. But now,
Ma'am, your time has expired. If you please finish.
so my structural engineer and architect, they need 6 months to get this blueprint ready so I can start to build a house. And please give me a chance. I will build a house, trust me, and I will prove.
Thank you.
And I
for
will
your comment.
invite everybody come to my house. I will be in here.
Thank you.
I
for
say
your,
what I mean.
you
Trust
for-
me,
thank
I
you for
will
your
do that
comment.
and I will make that happen.
Any
Thank
other
you.
comments on this item?
I can answer any question if anyone want to
No.
know.
Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments on this item? Here none. Back to commissions. Any other comments?
I've got a-
questions?
I'm sorry.
So if we approve this tonight, she still would have an opportunity to come into compliance and do something with her property before the foreclosure happens, because it could take 6 to 18 months.
Yeah, and again, as Chief said, it would need to be a something that is meaningful and substantial.
Mhm.
But yes,
It might help
that
to start
possibility
with
still
a power
exists.
of attorney that would be verifiable.
Right,
which-
you've still got to bear in mind that Ms. Marsh does not own the property. We're not presently dealing with the property owner.
Do you have the latest warranty deed at all?
I'm sorry?
Do you have the latest deed on the property?
Not in hand, no, I don't have it in my hand.
I'm just curious because how do I do this without compromising my phone for public comment or public? I did a research on the property appraiser, and it has a warranty deed, and it says the grantor and Melody U. Marsh, a married woman whose post office box is this in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that was back in '06.
It's 2004, and that was the latest property purchase. So is that the individual that we can't locate?
I believe that's Ms. Marsh's mother that she transferred the property
That's
to.
your mom?
If I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Okay. That's.
I have a question.
Thanks for clarifying that.
It was mentioned that it was a permit that was pointed out. What kind of a permit is that?
She applied for a demolition permit this afternoon. I suspect, I don't.
Are you talking, Mayor, are you talking about the one at the podium?
Right, at
That
the
was from
podium.
2002.
Oh, okay.
2002? Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
But as you said, that's not gonna be approved because she doesn't have a
Doesn't own
power of attorney
property.
for the property, so it's
Right.
not gonna be approved.
Yeah, and the other part about it is, please understand that all the stuff about permits, whether that's approved or not, it could have been approved this afternoon, it doesn't change, in my view, from a legal perspective, what you can and can't do. You're simply being asked at this juncture to allow me to initiate a foreclosure action. We can do that with an open building permit or a closed building. It's not really material to what we're discussing here tonight.
Yeah. And again, it's not fair for the neighbors, 13 years has been fighting to do that, so. Ma'am, this is, please stop.
13 years, she didn't know she was
That's just for us to talk right now. You already had your chance to speak. Thank you.
Can we make a motion?
Of course.
I'd like to make a motion that we proceed with the recommendation of our city attorney on foreclosure.
Second.
Just to clarify, it sounds like the property in question here, it still has an opportunity if they made significant leaps and bounds to put their property within compliance, that there'd still be an opportunity at some point during the foreclosure process.
Correct.
Did I hear that right, City Attorney?
Still possible.
Still
Okay.
possible.
Okay.
But they have to prove ownership of the property.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I mean,
And roll call, please.
Commissioner Carr?
yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther? Mayor LaHousas?
Yes, thank you. The next item on the agenda is item number 14, to appointment to the Planning and Zoning Board. Ma'am, we finished with that item. Thank you. Ma'am, you can actually go tomorrow to the Planning and Zoning, to the Building Department, and ask us questions if you like. Okay, thank you very much. Again, item number 14 is the appointment to the Planning and Zoning Board. We have two positions that we need to fill. One is for a regular member, and the other one is for an alternate member. We have the options is to appoint a person from the list to fill the unexpected term of L. Parker. This term will expire October 1st, 2019. And the second is to appoint somebody from the list as an alternate member. This term will expire October 1st, 2019. And I can start this time. We have a member, a person on the list that actually attended the Citizens Academy, Christy McCumber. I would like to appoint her as to fill the unexpected term for Al Parker for a regular member, and Melissa Vigil for the alternate. Vice Mayor?
Just let me look. Yes, I'm fine with that, Mayor.
Commissioner Sieber?
Well, I was looking at the applicant's choices here, and Justin, all across the board, says planning and zoning, so I know that's his primary interest. And with Christie, Heritage Preservation came first, so I was wondering whether we should put Justin in to fill that unexpired term and Christie as the alternate.
That was my pick as well, is I looked at across the board, planning and zoning, Justin, and he's got great qualifications. And Christie, since she sat on the Citizens Academy, as the alternate.
And I would go for Justin as the permanent position and David Petrotoni as the alternate.
Well, how we standing with the,
Okay, well, we have 3 for Justin Vesey as the regular member, and we have 2 for Miss Vigil, and 2 for Miss McCumber, and 1 for Mr. Petronelli.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I can change mine to Justin Bessie as as full member, and this lady's name?
Christie,
Christie.
as the alternate.
Okay,
that would be 3, I guess.
seems like we have a majority now.
We just need a motion.
I need a motion for that.
I'll make a motion to appoint Justin Vesey to the Planning and Zoning Board to fill the unexpired term of Al Parker. This term would expire October 1st, 2019, and to appoint Christine McCumber as the alternate member. This term would expire October 1st, 2019.
Second.
Got a second? And roll call, please.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Kikta?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Banther? Mayor LaHousas?
Yes. Well, that concludes the regular session agenda tonight, and we go to staff comments. Chief,
No comments, Mayor. Thank you.
city attorney,
No comments.
city manager,
No, sir.
Madam City Clerk, nothing. Okay. Vice Mayor Panther.
I had my PSTA board meeting in less than 12 hours, so I'll let you know how that goes. I appreciate you, Mayor, attending the local event we had. I think it was Transit is Golden. I was unable to attend, but I felt comfortable with you there. So I'm sure Mr. Miller was made aware of the importance of transit here, and I saw them. I was getting ready for one of my trips. I had to go to the docks to get a gift to bring somebody, and I saw them filming down there. The video guy from PSTA. Brad Miller loves videos, so I was glad to see that Tarpon, that Sponge Docks will be in some of their footage. So thank you.
And I think they got the message that senior transportation is very important to us. Made that very clear, and I'm looking forward to your first meeting.
This will be my second meeting.
Second meeting?
Second meeting, yes.
Oh, okay,
We skipped
good.
November. We went end of October. We skipped November. We have
Thank you. Commissioner Sieber,
No comments.
no comment. Commissioner Kikta,
No comments.
Commissioner Carr.
Just a reminder, I believe we have another commission meeting next week. Is that right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so for all those people that are watching and residents, love to have you out of public comments next week.
Thank you. Well, I got several things I need to talk about. First, I'd like to offer my condolences to our good friend, Mr. Saita family for passing of Joe. He was a great person. We're very grateful for his services to the military. He served in World War II and has been, he served on the crime watch for over 15, 20 years, huh?
20 years.
20
yeah.
years. And he was a very strong supporter of our police department.
Big time.
Yes.
What's his name again?
Major.
Mayor?
Joe
His name is
Saida.
Joseph Saita.
Oh, I know.
Saita.
Did he live in the woods?
Yes.
Yes, he
Oh, I
lived in the
remember him.
woods.
Yes. I
And
remember him.
every Veterans Day, he was always there.
We knew when we didn't see him Veterans Day that it wasn't good because he has not missed one of the Memorial Day ceremony in 24 years, I think.
Yeah. So he's going to be missed. I'd like to remind to everyone that Saturday, December 9, we have our Christmas parade. That starts at 10 a.m. at the South Pinellas Avenue and Morgan Street, right in front of Chris Prescription Shop. Saturday, right? Good. We're going to ride on a boat, huh?
Yes, sir. Bring candy because we never have enough.
Yeah. You going to have the girls with you, Vice
My
Mayor?
girls are ready
Oh, good.
to throw candy and break city violation.
My next comment goes to our city attorney. As we discussed, we received an email from a responsible business owner on West Tarpon Avenue recommending that we need to have a nuisance advisory board. My question is, we already have a code enforcement board. Is that redundant service? Is that going to be
Redundant.
I think so. There are jurisdictions out there that have both code enforcement boards and nuisance abatement boards. I find them to be superfluous of one. I mean, I think one can do the job that the other does. I think there are valid reasons. I think a city, the primary jurisdictions that use nuisance abatement boards or other boards like that are larger jurisdictions that are having specific nuisance and recurrent nuisance problems and a larger or a much larger number of nuisance problems than the city of Tarpon Springs presently experiences, or probably would ever experience based on its size. So I think that the code enforcement board can and does effectively handle those types of issues.
We've laid out the issues, and again, I'm probably the most involved in it because I've been involved in those things. Chief is second. We all agree with that. There is no need for. We've got a process now to go through. We got the present code enforcement. We laid it all out in the meet. I mean, it's laid out. It's on the website. We've done everything we can this past year to lay things out. You got a process you can go by. We can go to court. We can go to news. We've got all those processes. We got everything we need in place to go forward if we need to go and if we have the evidence. And I'd ask you to wait till next week when the police presents the stats and stuff, because if we had one of those boards, we'd be nowhere near able to do it and stuff. So we have all the mechanisms possible of any other community, if the evidence warrants, to go forward and take the action before them. There's no need for that board at all, and your chief, your city manager, and his 30 years of law enforcement, and your attorney would agree to that. There is no sense in that.
Mr. Licouris, I just want to clarify, that was not for any specific area. That was the general question, if we need to.
And the same stands for my statement in the
Had
general.
nothing to do with any specific area.
It's the same.
And you know, we also have abatement that the city manager can do under 854. We have abatement that the code enforcement officer or can, you know, basically levy. So in my opinion, it's redundant. It's unnecessary.
If it's redundant, if we already offer the services, we don't need to do that.
We have everything in place that we need.
Thank you. Well, the next one is Mr. Licouris. As we discussed, we are doing an excellent job, I believe, revitalizing and beautifying the historic downtown, and we receive many compliments as for a job well done. And I'd like to congratulate everybody involved, and especially our economic development manager. Karen is doing an excellent job. I believe we accomplished that because the good cooperation that we have with and the teamwork that we have with the business community and the property owners. But as we discussed, we have a lot of work to do in other areas, such as the North Pinellas Avenue and the Dodecanese Boulevard. There are some buildings that have been neglected and they need to be repaired. We must work with the property owners to beautify those areas and to suggest to them that the facade improvement grant is still available, and for them to take advantage of it. That's a great deal, getting free funding. We need to have more trees and landscaping to be planted on North Pinellas Avenue. Also, we need to take a look at the sponge docks. We need to make sure that the boats are operational, actually are used for sponging. It's very important that the sponge docks looks nice. They are presentable and pleasant to our residents and to the visitors. It's very important that our visitors have a good picture, a good icon, what's going on in the city, because tourism is our main industry. If you please take a look at those two areas and let us know.
We're already working on all those.
If you let us know what you're going to do and when you're going to correct them.
Remember, everybody needs to remember, alternate 19 is the state road and DOT, and the trees we've been working on for a long time. There's a lot of things we've been working on, but we don't have the same that we have on Tarpon Avenue when we took it over. So a lot of that. But the other things, we're looking at the places that you talked about. We're already looking at the boats. All those things, they're in the process of being asked the boat owners down there. I'm surprised you haven't got a call because they've got their notices about proving they belong there or they're out. So all those things, they're all in
working on that.
They're all in process.
Okay. And there are some buildings on North Pinellas that they need to be take a look at because they've been neglected. So, and that's our main street. And I've received complaints about that. Okay. You say something?
I was just gonna say something. We had previous staff members where we had a design in North Pinellas Avenue that encouraged the city commission at the time to place the trees elsewhere and encourage contract growing. That was a terrible, terrible move on the building department or past city planner or whoever it was. And I think he pulled the wool over the eyes and wasted a lot of money.
What were we talking about again?
We're talking about the plants along North Pinellas Avenue. So there was Yopon trees that were moved to Diston Street because they weren't growing fast enough due to growers or something along those lines. And there was olive trees also that were placed in other parts of the city. So That's an area of this.
Olive trees from North Pinellas?
No, so there was supposed to be olive trees, I believe, and yopon trees, and then they were all replaced by crepe myrtles. So we're still paying.
Oh, you're talking about a long time ago.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're talking about like maybe 6 years ago.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So we're still like the mayor brought up though. We're paying for a mistake that was made by this individual and that department. So
it was like 9.5 years ago, I think.
But I'm just bringing it up that how important it is. Again, it's a simple landscape discussion that we were just talking about, but the mayor brought it up again with the trees along North Pinellas
And we will.
Avenue,
I'll call attention to you and stuff. We've been having some good talks with DOT to give us some. Okay, what would you allow? What would you allow us to do different? Hopefully, we'll have some answers, and then we'll bring that to all of you to look. Here's some of the alternatives they've given us that they'll approve, and then this board can decide which one. So we're hoping that's coming soon.
Advise us.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we got to have the DOT. We got to have but they have been working. They have been, unlike the past, they are, it's a slow process because, the state. And I refrain from any comments about the dredge and the absolute zero we've got from anything statewide. But, they're slow, but the DOT in relation to past years is a lot more receptive, and I think by the beginning of the year, so we'll have something to bring back to you because they are moving. Before it was snail, and now moving slow, but it's moving along. And hopefully we'll have some ideas of what they would allow. Again, their whole thing is crashes and fragility, or whatever the word. I mean, that's why they're so restrictive on those. But they've loosened it. They've said they're going to loosen it and would give us some options. So hopefully we'll have those options for you to do that part of you. We're still working. If you know any of the vacant lots or the property owners on alternate 19 to help us, when Gary Sherman was here before he left, one of his things we're trying to approach him because we'd even do those deals of doing some landscaping to beautify that area, public-private partnerships on their own land to try to beautify that along there. And, we didn't get much success on that. Even with the fact, we'll take it out. Obviously, if you develop vacant land, we'll take it out. We didn't have much success in that to do something along that corridor to beautify it up. So all those are going to be continued on and hopefully brought back to you in the new year to figure out what we can do along there to make that looking better. Because
thank you. I really wanted to see North Pinellas to look like the downtown. Downtown is beautiful. Well, that concludes the regular session meeting, and it's adjourned at 9:44.
Right.
Yeah, we were trying to invite select a few people. We have Thursday, Friday, available.